across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good evening. It is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock as usual. And as usual, at midnight, it is your chance to talk back. And I do want to talk to you about what's going on with gas and oil prices. And I'd love to hear from you, particularly if you're somebody who's off-grid, who you know, you have to buy oil and you get it put in a tank. It's something that's completely alien to those of us that live in towns and cities, right? But if you have to buy fuel, and there's 1.7 million households that have to buy oil, have it delivered, put it in a tank, and the prices of those that I know from friends of mine have just become astronomical. And then Keir Starmer says, well, what we'll do is we're going to set aside £53 million to help those people. Well, I was reading today that people have done the maths and they're getting like £1 a week or something off their oil bill. So it's not very helpful at all. And it's only for those people on low incomes as well. So it is a question, really. None of this is of our making, right? None of this is anything that we've done in Britain. These fuel prices, it all falls at the feet of Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu at the moment. So I was just wondering, really, whether you think that we should all get help, proper help, with these bills, but can the country afford it? And it's a question as well as to whether we get that money now to help us through the next, God knows how long this is going to go on for, but then, or should we put that money towards renewables, because renewables will release us from the demon that is, you know, world wars and all sorts of issues across the globe, and being overly reliant, in fact dependent like a drug addict, to oil that has to be coming from other countries. So I wonder if it is an argument for more renewables. I'd love to hear from you if you've noticed prices going up. What about petrol? Have petrol prices gone up? And what do you feel about the possibility in the future of rationing fuel? And certainly there's already talk about reducing speed limits in order to preserve fuel, to reduce speed limits on motorways down from 70 to 60. That's what happened in the 70s. So I'm just really interested to hear what you're prepared to do, what you think the government should do, what we should do as a country. Is it time to push forward on renewables? What do you think that we should do in order to make our lives a lot easier? Because if this does go on for very much longer, it is going to impact us harshly, and decisions are going to have to be made. There will be priorities with hospitals and ambulances and fuel for those things. Not in any way wishing to panic anybody, because we're a long way off the 70s for now, and I'm talking to an expert about that in a moment. So there's not panic, but I just wonder if we're prepared for what might come next. Other countries, and Asia is far more exposed, right? So there's a lot of Asian countries that are far more exposed to the oil that comes through the Strait of Hormuz, but they're having to make really significant decisions about preserving fuel in those countries. So I'd like to hear from you about this. I'd love you to give me a call. What would be your solution to this current crisis? 0344 499 1000. Those calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you back. And you can text the word talk and your message to 87222. So that is the way to get in touch with Talkback for midnight. Coming up as well, Amy Fisher, the wonderful Amy Fisher, she'll be here as well to go through the papers. We're going to be talking to Alan Grant from the Scottish Daily Express in Edinburgh about the vote tonight in Holyrood. They're having cast their final vote on assisted dying for terminally ill adults in Scotland. So we'll be discussing that as well, see which way he thinks. I don't think we'll get the result of the vote tonight or even in the early hours of the morning, but I guess we might. We will bring that to you if we do get it. We're also going to be talking to Will Freeman about US President Donald Trump saying that he can do what he likes with Cuba. and talking about what's going on in that region as well. But first, industry experts have warned that Britain faces a significant shortfall of the supply in oil and gas within the next 2 months that could force ministers to ration supplies if the war in the Middle East continues. And in a bid to save petrol, motorists could face speed restrictions under government plans to help Britain cope with a fuel crisis similar to the one in the 70s. Like I said, we're a fair way off that yet, but it is a reference point for us. And countries like Sri Lanka have already put in measures to tackle the crisis, as the country declared that every Wednesday is a national holiday for public institutions in order to conserve fuel. Other countries are suggesting that suits and ties are out in the business place, that you should wear T-shirts and shorts so that the air conditioning doesn't have to be on. In India, there's a crisis over crematoriums because of the gas supply. They're now saying they're not going to cremate those bodies in that way anymore. So there's a lot of things that are happening in different countries now in order to not hit panic. Right, and that's the last thing we want to do, is to have those shortages. So in order to prevent those shortages, we could see some form of adjustment to our daily lives in order to preserve fuel. Joining me now is Chaitanya Kumar, who is head of economy and environmental policy at the New Economics Foundation. Thank you very much indeed for joining me this evening. How close are we, do you think, to some form of adjustment to the way that we just blindly go through our lives at the moment in terms of fuel?
Firstly, thanks for having me. It's remarkable, as I heard you make your opening remarks, how essential energy is to every aspect of our lives. Back in the 70s, it was the case, and even now. It's a bedrock of civilization, and it's no surprise that in this war, both sides are attacking energy infrastructure, and we've seen that with Ukraine and Russia. We're seeing this now with this war. But when it comes to response, I think it's quite natural that the public will respond to high prices by curtailing their consumption. We saw that back in the energy crisis not so long back in 2022-23. The official estimates suggest that energy consumption fell by 16% in 1 year as a response to higher prices. We will see the same this time around. Of course, it depends on how prolonged this crisis will be.
So there's a sort of natural, if you like, we naturally ration ourselves because of cost.
Yeah.
But at what point would a government step in, like I say, to prevent rolling blackouts, to prevent shortages that see panic? I mean, presumably they have to do it before we get to that point. Otherwise, there's no point. At what point would a government step in and start to make those changes?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to distinguish two things here. One is this: for some countries, this is very much a crisis of supply. For the UK, the good thing is we rely heavily on countries like Norway and the United States for a lot of our oil and gas, actually, which means that the risk in the short to medium term is less about whether we'll run out of supplies and more about the fact that the prices are skyrocketing. Because as we know, the price of oil is set globally, the price of gas is set regionally, say, for example, at a European level. So the price is going up considerably. And the question for us is, at what point are we going to say we can't keep paying more and more for the same amount of energy? We have to start thinking of other ways, either supporting people with their bills, which we have to do, but also think about finding alternative forms of energy and also reducing energy consumption quite considerably.
In the 70s, and I don't really, I don't have a memory of that, but in the 70s, speed limits were reduced, because changing your speed limit from 70 to 60 is actually a huge drop in fuel consumption, isn't it? There has been talk. There have been, there are people mentioning that could be a possible outcome of this, or again, do you think that people will self-monitor their driving behaviour in order because of the costs of it?
Yeah, I think so. People will certainly self-monitor and curtail their consumption. But of course, the challenge is where the government has to step in is really think about protecting essential consumption. That's the most important bit, any form of essential consumption. So unlike the 70s, we have better options today, better targeting, for example, of support. So if you're a care worker, if you're an emergency worker, if you're somebody who's having to respond to a blackout in a certain region, and you have to go there, drive and fix an engineer, for example, we know these individuals, these companies, these vehicles, we should be able to quickly target support. So if you go into a petrol station and you're able to sort of demonstrate quickly who you are, you should be able to perhaps get a subsidized rate on petrol or diesel, for example. These sorts of interventions are certainly possible. I get the value of reducing speed limits completely, but I doubt we have to intervene at such a level because people will naturally curtail their consumption.
What about things where people can't curtail their consumption? I mean, one of the biggest worries, I think, with the Strait of Hormuz is it's not just oil that comes through the Strait of Hormuz. You've got a lot of medications that are coming through from India, a lot of generic medications that also travel through there. That could bump up the prices of drugs. Fertilizers as well. We know that we're heavily reliant on fertilizers for our food production. So these are things that we can't self-regulate, if you like. What happens with things like that? Is that just an inflationary pressure, or is it more serious?
It very much is a function of how prolonged the crisis is. In the short to medium term, it'll certainly be an immediate inflationary shock, no doubt about it, and we'll see figures reflecting that in due course. The problem, of course, is how do we create a buffer? Ultimately, what we've done in the last decade and a half, 2 decades, is what is called in the industry just-in-time supplies. We have really reduced how much buffers we have domestically, particularly gas, for example. We realized in the early crisis of 2022-23, we decided to shut down our only major gas storage infrastructure because we decided the market knows best and the market will price the gas at the appropriate price and we'll just pay for it. We don't have to worry about stocks and resilience. Yeah. Now, we're trying to do things differently. We still haven't opened fully the rough storage off the coast of Cheshire. Similarly, that same logic applies to other forms of energy as well. But you made the more important point right at the outset. All of this can be dealt with in the medium to long term by completely transitioning away from fossil fuels. This sort of drug addict behavior, as you quite aptly put, that is really causing a lot of havoc at the moment, and we're seeing that. And this geopolitical tension is not going away anywhere. So if you're really serious about energy resilience and energy security, we have to think about energy independence. We can't keep relying on, even if it's our allies. Like Americans are meant to be our allies, and look what's happening right now, right? So we have to think about energy independence, and the only way I can imagine that is from renewables, the UK is blessed with lots of wind, and why not make the most of it? And we're already trying to do that at the moment. We just need to step up.
Yeah, there's still going to be some more North Sea wind farms, isn't there, etc. The thing is that a lot of people are told that we can't survive on renewables alone, that it is not a reliable, continuous source. The grid needs to be updating. We need presumably more storage ability for fuel that is produced on windy days, so that when it's not windy, we've got the fuel that we can use. So there has to be a way of like bigger batteries, or I don't know how this stuff works, but things like that, in order to give us the confidence that actually renewables and renewables alone can solve our issue. Is that a problem in terms of the gap of ability for us to believe that, or is it true that we can't rely on them on their own?
It is 100% true. We can't rely on them fully. But I think anybody, even someone who's as evangelical as I am about renewables, will have to accept that they will not be 100% source of all forms of energy. That is just not true. What we're trying to build is a system where the reliance on gas is as minimal as possible, and gas plants only operate in those very minute amounts of time where the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, and nuclear power, which will provide a lot of energy as well in the future, perhaps is not enough to create the backup. In those scenarios, we will certainly see gas plants stepping up and providing power, no doubt about that. But I'm just talking about electricity. If you think about transport, if you think about chemical plants and cement factories and heavy industry, decarbonizing those industries, i.e. moving away from fossil fuels, is a far bigger challenge. So what we know today is we've got the technology to reduce our dependence from an electricity point of view from fossil fuels. And we're doing that relatively quickly. The question is more about at what price. Are we paying too high a price? That's a good debate to have.
Yeah.
But when it comes to industry and heavy industry, I think that the jury is out that there are a family of technology options, not just renewables, that can get us away from our dependence on fossil fuels. What that is depends on a variety of industries, because we're not there yet. And I don't think anybody at the moment is saying decarbonize now and reduce all our dependence now. It'll be a transition, and some will transition faster than others.
And we need, this isn't just a case of, oh, this is just a woke agenda. This is something that we need to do in order to be independent of the global crises that happen.
Absolutely, yes. And we see this in China, right? Like, as you rightly said again, Asian countries leading with China are the highest importers of oil in the world. They know that this kind of reliance on potentially hostile powers is not sustainable at all.
Yeah.
And what are they doing? They're basically doubling down on electric vehicles to transition away. And if China moves on any issue, the globe moves, because there's such a huge dominant economic force that if they decide to do something differently, the markets swing. And that is why we have the entire global market, in lots of ways, being flooded with cheap EVs, electric vehicles, made in China. They're adopting them very, very fast, and they're also flooding the global market with cheap electric vehicles. Challenge, of course, is something else, which is we've decided we want to put tariffs, Europeans and Americans especially, want to put tariffs on Chinese vehicles for geopolitical reasons, which obviously has other knock-on effects for consumers.
And of course, China, despite what Donald Trump says, have huge wind farms. I mean, some of the biggest wind farms in the world. You can see them from space, I believe. And they are, again, they themselves are trying to transition away from being, you know, addicted to and reliant on oil.
Absolutely. And I mean, every time I look at some of the numbers coming out of China, my brain can't compute, like, how is it possible to even build at such pace?
Yeah.
In the month of May in 2025, in just 1 month of May, China built more solar power than all of the world combined in the entire year of 2025, in just 1 month. It is astonishing speed that they built. And you can imagine, like, the amount of material needed, the amount of engineering needed. They've got the skills. They're good at building stuff. We know that. We've seen that now for the last decade and a half. But what they also do is push these products into the global market and suppress the price. On some things, we benefit, like solar panels, because we don't make them domestically. On other things, it's dicey because we also have a domestic industry to protect when it comes to, say, automotives, for instance.
What do we do? I mean, it's all very well talking about how renewables will you know, start to replace our reliance on these fossil fuels, but there are 1.7 million households across the UK that are not on the grid, right? They have to buy oil, and they have to, you know, it's a physical commodity, put it in a tank, and that's what runs their heating or their hot water or whatever. We seem to be quite a long way behind in bringing those people into a world where they themselves are not reliant on that commodity of liquid oil.
Yeah, and in the case with households off the grid, you're right, but also reliant on dirty forms of fuels, wood burning, for example. Some form of wood burning certainly is dirty. And it's going to take time because connecting them to the grid will come with added costs. Does that make sense to connect a handful of households in a remote rural area to the grid? The cost of that perhaps is far more than continuing to pay for their heating oil for an extended period of time. So these are economic trade-offs that have to be made. I honestly do not know what the long-term solution is for these households and what decarbonization pathway would look like. Perhaps some connection to the grid. I know for a fact that domestic energy generation, local energy generation, for example, I myself benefit from a solar panel on my rooftop and a battery. I have seen bill reductions almost instantly. That is one part of the solution. But when it comes to heating, we haven't got the technology yet, except heat pumps, of course, but that requires you to be reliant on the grid again. So these are complex questions. I can understand why heating oil is a preferred technology for some off-grid households, but the transition perhaps a little slower for them than the rest of us.
It's a really fascinating topic, and thank you very much indeed for joining me to discuss this. So it was Chaitanya Kumar, Head of Economy and Environmental Policy at the New Economics Foundation. Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you. Got some breaking news for you, and that is the Scottish votes are in on the assisted dying vote. They have voted against it. This is after months and months, or years actually, of debate and everything going into this. MPs have voted 69 to 57 against passing that bill. That was after a 4-hour debate just this evening. So that vote is in. I'm surprised it was in so quickly, but there you go. That is the result, that they have voted against the assisted dying bill. We are going to be addressing that and looking at that story in about 20 minutes time. So we will be talking there to the journalist in Edinburgh who is going to talk us through it, Alan Grant, who will be able to tell us what happened, what went wrong or what went right, and if that is it now, that's it. Scotland have voted, and they have voted against it, despite all of the guardrails that were put in place. So we'll be addressing that a little bit later. Coming up at midnight, of course, it's your chance to talk back, and I do want to talk to you about the oil and fuel crisis that we are facing, and could face a deeper crisis because of America and Israel starting that war in the Middle East. So I do want to talk to you about that, the impact of that on your life. Particularly want to hear from you if you live in Northern Ireland, because I know there are a lot of unconnected to the grid housing in Northern Ireland. I want to hear from you about what's happening with your oil prices. I want to hear from people in the UK. 1.7 million homes are not attached to the grid and have to rely on physical oil being delivered. It is completely alien to those of us who live in cities and towns, but this is their life, and when it runs out, it runs out. You know, that's it, it's gone. So I want to hear from you as to what's happening with you and what adjustments you're going to have to make. And there is already talk of looking at rationing if this continues on, and it looks like a lot of experts are saying this could be at least until September or November. Donald Trump keeps saying it's nearly over. But even if it finished tomorrow, the Strait of Hormuz doesn't necessarily open. And even if it does open, oil production, after many facilities have been damaged and others have been shut down, they're going to take a while to start up again. We don't just go, all right, taps are back on. Excellent. So we could be looking at some type of rationing. Who knows? Not as bad as the 70s, if you remember the 70s, but it could be a thing. So that's what we're going to be talking about at midnight. So please do give me a call. I'd love to talk to you about this, find out how this has changed your life. Has petrol gone up? Has diesel gone up in your area? What's happening? 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at national rate. We do call you back. Oh, and the other thing I want to ask you about the government help, the 53 million, which didn't sound enough when he said it. How is that going to help you? Is it going to help you? Let me know about that as well. And you can text 87222. Now, chance for you to win something. Not pay for it, win it. Win it. We're giving you the chance to win 2 hospitality tickets to the British Grand Prix on Sunday the 5th of July with the full Racing Green trackside experience. This is the ultimate setup for race day. You'll get exclusive grandstand seats at the Loop and the Village Corners, plus inner track access to watch the drivers arriving at the paddock, and access to hospitality shuttle bus, racing simulators and live music between sessions, and all-day street food and an open bar. Just have a listen now to how you can enter.
For your chance to win, text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close 20th of March 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie. Just a reminder of that breaking news that Scotland has voted against the assisted dying bill. It was, I think it was 69 to 57 votes. Yeah, it was 69 to 57 against passing the bill after a 4-hour debate this evening. We're going to be talking about that coming up in about 15 minutes time. But before that, US President Donald Trump, the gift that keeps on giving, is certainly giving it to Cuba at the moment. Here's a clip of what he said earlier on about Cuba.
I think Cuba's the end. You know, all my life I've been hearing about the United States and Cuba. When will the United States do it? I do believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be good honor. That's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth? They're a very weakened nation right now. They were for a long time.
He can take it. He can do whatever he likes with it. And by the way, that slight bit of pushback was from Fox News, which is not a news organisation, but that was a Fox interview, which is unusual, right? You can take it? Yep, I can do what I like with it. So since the Venezuela takeover, whatever that was, Trump has prevented oil from getting to Cuba. Cuba is 50% reliant on Venezuelan oil. So for 3 months, they've had half of their oil provided to them, which has created an enormous crisis in Cuba. There has already been blackouts. There's been all sorts of issues with the blockade. And Cuban residents have been left without power. The national grid collapsed yesterday. There's a humanitarian crisis now. Hospitals are not being able to run generators and things like that. But Donald Trump wants Cuba, and he's going to take it. Well, that made me think, how is this allowed to happen? So joining me now to discuss this and just my complete flabbergastedness is Will Freeman, a fellow for Latin America Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. Thank you for joining me. It's great to see you, Will. Quite a bold statement there by the President of the United States.
That's right. I think, you know, no matter where you stand on this, everyone agrees we're coming to an inflection point here. I think there will be some kind of change in Cuba. We don't know yet if it'll lead in a democratic direction, if there will be some new form of military rule, maybe paying lip service to socialism, but much more of an open economy. So, you know, all we can say is it does seem that the old system is ending as we knew it, and something will replace it.
So is any country in the Americas now Donald Trump's to take?
I don't think so. I think that, you know, this is a very unique set of circumstances in Cuba. This is a regime that no longer has any popular legitimacy. You have 1 to 2 million out of a population of 11 million people who've left in the last 5 years. You also have an exceptional degree of economic leverage because at the end of the day, you know, the Cuban regime made the decision in the 90s and the 2000s to remodel their economy around tourism. Well, that worked for a while, but it's pretty hard to run a tourism-based economy without access to the dollar financial system. It's pretty hard to run a tourism-based economy when most of your tourists come from Canada and Europe, and, you know, Donald Trump could come into office and say, well, I'm going to end visa-free travel for people who've been to Cuba. So it was always risky to set up the economy around that model. And I think that means that, you know, Trump has a degree of leverage here. He doesn't have in even, you know, say a country like Guatemala, you know, not even Panama, maybe Panama, but we're talking about, you know, very few countries that fall into this category. So, you know, he's not going to invade Brazil. He's not going to decide what happens in Argentina. I don't even think the United States is going to be that influential in Colombia's upcoming election, but Cuba falls in a category of its own.
So, I mean, he's already talked about installing Marco Rubio there, hasn't he? The man with about 1,000 jobs already.
Yeah.
The Marco Rubio in his massive shoes is going to end up running Cuba for some reason. Is there an analogy to I don't know, rescuing Cuba and then handing it back to the Cubans? Why does Donald Trump have to be? He's already listed on Wikipedia as the president of Venezuela.
No, look, I mean, I think even compared to his statements that the U.S. would be running Venezuela, obviously those weren't literally true. I mean, there's a degree of, you know, pressure behind the scenes, no doubt, in steering events in Venezuela. But I think in Cuba, actually, it'll be even harder to do that. There is no Delcy Rodriguez of Cuba. There is no faction within the Communist Party or the military that we know of that would be as pliant as Venezuela's current leadership. So, he's saying that, and obviously, there is very serious real pressure on Cuba. I'm not denying that, but I don't think that either we're going to see the U.S. directly intervene militarily on the island, put administrators in charge of the island. I think we're going to ultimately see a deal with the Cuban military. And my fear is actually that we will just see a new form of authoritarianism in Cuba. So it'll remain a dictatorship, stripped of its ideological pretenses, but a military dictatorship with a more open economy. And look, I mean, a more open economy would help a lot of people. Ordinary people in Cuba would be, in much less desperate situations than they are today. So I'll be happy if the administration can even get that. But it's tough to imagine democracy. Cuba has not had a lot of experience with democracy.
No.
Think about 12 years in the country's entire history, and the military remains immensely powerful.
But I mean, look, there'll be a lot of people who are thinking, well, that's their business, right? Like you said, they've had 12 years of democracy. It just seems that for this current administration, there is no such thing as autonomy. There is no such thing as and often it doesn't make things better. We just talked about Venezuela, and I was watching a congressional hearing the other day with Steve Bessent, being asked under what authority that they've taken hundreds of millions of dollars from Venezuela and put it in a bank account in Qatar. Under what authority? You're not at war with Venezuela, so the only authority that Steve Bessent mentioned was one that is applied during a war. And who decides what money they get back? They have to apply for their own money back. I mean, this feels like an American takeover for their own interests of countries who live a different way.
Well, I think I would agree that there's absolutely self-interest playing out here. It's pure power in many ways. I'm not trying to say this is legal, but look, let's not be too precious about how the Cuban and Venezuelan regimes ran their own countries and the huge consequences that created for the entire region. I mean, look, Cuba, if you want to talk about meddling in other countries, Cuba was financing insurgencies all over the hemisphere, organizing them, allowing, Colombian guerrillas who kidnapped children, who build an army of kidnapped children as their forced soldiers. They were giving those people shelter for years, allowing them to train and organize in Cuba.
But like you said, it's unlikely that any intervention from Donald Trump. I mean, look, I'll point to Iran, right? That's happening now. Regime change. They've just got a more hardline Ayatollah. And that is unlikely to change. They are not going to affect.
I think Iran's a much stronger country. I mean, Iran is a much.
Yeah, it is. But what I'm saying is, if there is an ideology that runs a country, even if it's the most heinous ideology that we don't agree with, and I don't agree with that, I don't agree with what's going on in Cuba or Venezuela, but it is unlikely that intervention does anything that make it worse or more hardline or more underground.
Yeah, I think in a lot of cases that's true. I do think it's a little different. So I'm very skeptical of intervention in the Middle East. I don't think it's worked out, In the Americas, there have been obviously cases which we never want to repeat and which did cause, real trauma and long-term negative consequences. But there's also whoever talks about Panama. Is Panama a failed state? Last time I checked, it's doing pretty well. I think it's a
Trump has already mentioned he wants to take the Panama Canal.
That's right, and I don't agree with him, and I think that Panama's doing a perfectly fine job as stewards of the canal. So
yeah, but that's what I'm saying is that without there doesn't seem to be a limit on Donald Trump. There doesn't seem to be anything that he thinks he can't do. So if he turns his attention to Panama, what's going to happen there? If he messes up Cuba and turns it into a battle zone where thousands of innocent people die in that. He's created this problem with the blackouts and the oil pressure and the fuel pressure and the humanitarian crisis. He creates a crisis and then goes in and sorts it out. That to me, it looks like Donald Trump has just not got any guardrails around him at all.
Yeah, I think that's it's largely fair, right? This is an extremely powerful executive. On the energy crisis, it does obviously what the Cuban decisions have also mattered. And again, this is this is a economy that got massive infusions of resources. We're worth tons of money from Venezuela for years. Where did all that money go? I mean, how is it that the conditions are that terrible on the ground? Obviously, this has not been fairly distributed among the Cuban people, and I think there's obviously they're working under constrained conditions, but there could have been much more done to protect the energy grid from the situation it's in now. I think it's because Cuba had a lifeline all this time.
Yeah, but it again, and obviously none of this is your fault. I'm not blaming you, but the people in glass houses should not throw stones. I mean, the American people could quite legitimately ask where $10 billion of their money went when Donald Trump paid himself $10 billion towards the Board of Peace, which he clearly is, Board of Peace. So, you know, I'm just saying that in order to want to go in and affect this sort of change, and you've got to be whiter than white yourself, surely. I don't know, it's just a philosophical point, really.
Yeah, I don't know if I can really, again, it's not to excuse those things. I don't know if you're going to find any country like that in the world. And so I do think there are figures within this administration who are they're very different. There are a lot of different interests here, different motives acting, and people, I think like Marco Rubio, who I don't think this is purely a self-interested gambit for him. I think this is something he's pursued for a long time. I may not agree. I don't agree with him on a lot of issues, but I think it's hard to frame as kind of pure corruption, at least from some members of the administration. So with that, I'm afraid I have to go.
Listen, thank you. We've run out of time anyway. But Will, it was great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Will Freeman there, Fellow for Latin American Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. Right, quick break, and we'll be back to discuss the fact that Scotland has decided to vote against legalising assisted dying.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a very good evening to you. Just a reminder that coming up at the top of the hour is Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. She's going to be here in the studio at the top of the hour to go through the papers with us. Now, though, as I broke earlier on in the show, Scotland has indeed voted. It has cast its vote on the assisted dying bill. MSPs at Holyrood have cast their final vote and they voted against it. That vote was 69 to 57. It follows over a year of debates on the matter, and the legislation was introduced by backbench Scottish Liberal Democrat MSP Liam MacArthur, who said it would have provided a choice of compassion and dignity. Critics of the bill, though, called it dangerous and say that MSPs should focus instead of improving end-of-life care. We hear that all the time. So, with me to discuss this is Alan Grant, a columnist for the Scottish Daily Express in Edinburgh. Alan, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Boy, that vote came through quickly.
Well, indeed, it came through quickly, but it's felt like the end of quite a long process, and there'll be many, I think, people across Scotland who will be trying to get a good night's sleep tonight, reflecting on what's happened and internalising it, figuring out what this means for Scotland going forward and for the entire topic of assisted dying.
So, I mean, is that it now? There's no way that this can come back, or there's no way that this can, somebody can appeal it, if you like. That was final.
Well, this may be it for Liam MacArthur's bill, but we have had this come through Holyrood twice before with Patrick Harvey and with Margaret MacDonald as well. Have had bills to this effect previously, so it's really up in the air as to whether or not it'll come back. May come back in the next Parliament, depending how that looks. But for now, for this Parliament, staring in the barrel of another Holyrood election, this one is done for now.
What were the main objections? I mean, I read through some of quite a few of the guardrails that were put in place, and it seems a lot of the objections really were covered off on those. This has been going on for a year. There's been a lot of amendments made, and recently in those amendments, 175 of them, I think. So all of these amendments have gone through and been, it's been very, very carefully put together, this.
Well, absolutely. And you heard a lot of the MSPs in the very long debate praising Liam MacArthur, praising his receptiveness to amendments, and praising the respectful and dignified nature in way in which this bill has gone through. Again, it's difficult to really put into terms exactly the kind of scope of the job of work that's been done here. And one of the things that did come up, and one of the objections that constantly came up, were about concerns around disability, concerns around safeguarding, concerns around coercion, and I think some of those have just not been able to be dislodged out of certain MSPs' minds. Of course, there was a free vote, but they voted with their consciences.
But that to me it just feels like it's quite easy to answer that, because in this bill again it was said that disability in and of itself was not a criteria for assisted death, and that you had to have, a couple of doctors say that you were within 6 months of dying. Many people live many years with a disability. I always find that argument very, very strange, and it always comes, people say, well, I'm worried they're going to put disabled people down, but it's a self-administered drug. And the only way you can get it is if people agree you've only got 6 months to live. So it's, in and of itself, disability was not an issue.
Absolutely, and this was Daniel Johnson's intervention, one of the Labour MSPs, into the debate, was the 6 month test, or the 6 month protocol, if you will. It just doesn't seem to have persuaded members enough at this stage, and I would suspect there will be a concentrated effort within those who will continue campaigning for assisted dying to go through the bill, go through the objections, go through those members who did vote against it, and come back again and try and get this through. I think there is an appetite for this in Scotland, and it's just about getting it right and addressing those concerns. Whether that's possible, remains to be seen. That's a job for this stage another Parliament.
Any other objection? I mean, is there a religious element to this? Is there a lot of religion sort of knocking around in Holyrood?
Oh, it's a very, very good question. There are religious members of the Scottish Parliament, of course. I didn't hear a tremendous amount of religion-based objections in the Scottish Parliament. It feels like quite a secular place, generally speaking. But there may be MSPs, and people like John Mason, for instance, may have had a religious grounding to his objections to the bill. But no, I think these were largely concern-motivated objections and failing to be reassured to a sufficient extent. But again, one of the things I think does need to be taken away from this was the incredibly respectful way in which this whole process has happened. It's been a very serious, very sensible, very compassionate, pragmatic process, and there's been a lot of talk about how it showed Holyrood at its best,
Yeah.
and I have to say I agree with that. I think it's MSPs, regardless of how they felt about this bill and whether they're happy or less happy about the result, can hold their heads high as we go out as we come to the end of this Parliament and look forward to the next one.
I mean, it certainly wasn't a disastrous vote for those that would have wanted an assisted dying bill, was it? I mean, I would suggest that that was fairly close, 69 to 57. And so, you know, maybe they will come back with something else in the next Parliament. Do you think that's likely?
I would say it's fairly like whether it happens in the next Parliament, I don't know. Someone who's going to have to pick up that baton and take it into the future. It might be a Parliament after that. We don't know, but I don't think this issue is going away.
Another objection I always hear, or another reason, is that we shouldn't be talking about people dying or choosing to die. We should be talking about end of life care. It is woefully underfunded. We know that, hospices and even the drugs. You know, a lot of people die in excruciating pain because the drugs just aren't there, or because of Harold Shipman. They're not allowed to make people comfortable as they used to. There's morphine, and so end-of-life care has actually become worse for people since the Shipman and crisis. So will this spark a debate, do you think, in terms of looking at end-of-life care? Because that's always my worry, is that this reduces options and it doesn't replace it with another option.
Well, I think one of the things that did come up during the debate was this issue of palliative care, of end-of-life care. And opponents of the bill in particular were very keen to stress their desire for it. Rather than there being assisted dying, we focus more on palliative care. I think that would be true regardless of if this bill passed or not. There does need to be more focus on palliative care, irrespective of what happened this evening. But I think now that the bill has fallen, there's even more of an emphasis for it to happen, because there's a clearly desire for change and a clear desire for development in this area of policy. And I think there's a certain emphasis, certain responsibility rather, on the people who voted down this bill to spearhead that, to pick up that baton and take a bit of responsibility for, okay, this is what you wanted instead. Go make it happen, go champion it, and I'm sure commentators and voters across Scotland will be keeping an eye on that, and to see who puts their money where their mouth is on that score. And personally, I was in favour of the bill. I thought it was sufficient. I am sad to see it fall, but yeah, campaigning for palliative care is something that I would like to be part of and would like to see happen. Because hopefully we all live long enough to need it. Basically, I suppose it would be my point.
Yeah, I mean, and that is the thing that always frustrates me about this is that it's a removal of choice without another option, and I find that really frustrating. You say, okay, then if you're going to deny me that right, and I'm somebody who lives with MS, right? So this is personal to me. So if you're going to deny me that right, then at least give me another option. But you walk away as soon as you say no. You just walk away, and then what? You know, there isn't that choice there anymore. What will you be writing for your readers about this? What would your take be on this? Is this you know, in a sense, cowardice? Is this political? Is this, well, we don't want to be the people who voted in this because it would be unpopular? What will your take be on this as a journalist?
I suppose it's something we've already sort of covered, actually. It's this idea that, okay, Parliament has decided for now that assisted dying is not something that Scotland will have. A large part of that argument was about the need for better palliative care. Well, go and get it done then.
Yeah.
Go and deliver better palliative care. Make people who are at the end of their lives more comfortable, better supported, better financed, better resourced, with more options. To me, is now the responsibility that the Scottish society and Scottish political society now has. We have to do that now.
And how will the vote be? You know, it's late at night now. The response of the Scottish people. You say that there clearly is an appetite for this. Will there be a lot of disappointment in Scotland?
I would say so. Yeah, I think the vote probably reflects Scottish society to an extent. There's probably a divide. People have their concerns, people have their worries about it. People have a sort of maybe an ideal set of circumstances in their head that don't reflect society. It's a messy, complex. It's all of us. It's all of humanity. It's messy. It's difficult. It's hard to make a decision over. I think there will be people who are disappointed. There will be people who think they perhaps dodged a bullet, if I can use a fairly ill-advised phrase. Maybe that's not the term for it. I don't. As you say, it is late at night here. I think there will be some sore feelings, some hurt feelings. There will be some happiness about it. But again, tomorrow morning we have to. We have to continue to work together.
And like you say, insist that they do something about it, right? You've taken that away, prove that you're going to replace that with something decent so that people are not dying in absolute horror. And I've had a friend die in absolute horror and pain, and I would not wish that on anybody. So better palliative care, or keep your nose out of my choice of life or death.
Absolutely, and this is the thing that does come up when you talk to people on a one-to-one basis about this. Yeah. Everybody has a story, right? Yeah. Everyone's got a grandparent, has a relative, a friend, a partner, or whoever who has had this or who has needed this, and it's not happened. So, if we can be more sympathetic to each other, then
I agree. I agree. Well, listen, good luck with getting them to step up and do their thing. If I can help in any way, let me know. Good to speak to you. Thank you, Alan Grant, there, columnist for the Scottish Daily Express in Edinburgh. Right, stay where you are. Amy Fisher's next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and welcome. It's good to have your company. Coming up at midnight, it is your chance to talk back. It's a special hour dedicated just to you. Just your voices. That's it. Just you and me having a chat. And what I want to talk to you about is the fuel crisis that we are heading into. And I want to know from you if you've noticed in your area about fuel prices going up, what that's doing to you, what that does to your life. If you're off-grid, if you're one of the 1.7 million households that rely on actual oil being delivered to you in a tanker and being put in a tank, what's happened to the prices there? Because I've heard a few stories from friends of mine who live out in the countryside, and it makes your teeth curl. It's just horrific. The prices, and is it gouge? Is it price gouging? Is it what's going on? I mean, these prices are ridiculous, and I want to know if you are prepared, perhaps, for a certain amount of rationing. I mean, I was speaking to an expert earlier who said, actually, in this country, we're fairly good at self-rationing. In other words, knowing because the cost of things are so high that we tend to use our cars less, or we drive slower because that burns less fuel. But there could come a time that there would be some rationing. I mean, there was in the 70s. We're not near the 70s crisis yet, but even if the war in the Middle East were to cease tomorrow, and there is absolutely no sign of that happening, then there are oil-producing depots and countries on fire at the moment. There are oil-producing companies and countries who have suspended oil production, quoting an act of God, because that's the only way they can get out of their contracts, force majeure. So they've quoted that and said, we cannot be producing oil at the moment. And countries like Saudi Arabia are having to slow production or stop production because they've run out of storage space for those oil barrels, because it's an actual physical commodity that has to actually physically be delivered. And on top of that, you've got the Strait of Hormuz not operating, or only operating for a few ships here and there. In fact, China, they're getting a few of their ships through because Iran has said it's American or Israeli connected ships that can't go through. That also has an impact, as I was saying earlier on things like fertiliser. That'll have an impact on our food costs. The transporting of our food, the inflation is undoubtedly bound to go up. I mean, if you remember with the Ukraine-Russia war, we saw an enormous rise in inflation. We could be looking at that sort of inflationary pressure again on drugs coming through the Strait of Hormuz that are manufactured cheaply in India. Most of the generic drugs come from there. And issues like I said, with fertiliser, other things come through the Strait of Hormuz. And look, we're not as exposed as Asian countries. Those Asian countries are already having to make really stark choices. I keep going back to it. It was on the front page of the FT yesterday, that India can no longer burn their dead bodies because of the gas that they use. That's a massive impact on a country. Other countries in Asia are having to take days off in the middle of the week to stop people from travelling. Other companies are people are being told not to wear suits and jackets to work, to wear shorts and T-shirts so they don't have to run the aircon. So there's all of these things are happening, and there's rationing on petrol for cars, or cars with certain number plates are being allowed to run one day and then not the next day, etc., etc. So all of these countries have started rationing, and they ration before it hits crisis point. That's the whole point. So there's already murmurs and talking about it in this country, although they don't want us to talk about it because they don't want to create panic. And nobody wants to create panic, and there is no need to. Panic won't solve anything. We know that with toilet rolls and pasta, I think, from COVID. That doesn't solve anything, right? So this isn't about panic. This is just about being forewarned. And what are you prepared for? Do you think that we can self-ration? Can you self-ration? Can you not use your car so much? Can you drive slower to save fuel? The difference between 70 miles an hour and 60 miles an hour is huge in fuel consumption. That's the biggest leap in fuel consumption for a vehicle. And does this actually provide an argument to support more renewables? Right? That we could have some form of fuel independence. We'll always be reliant on some amount of oil and gas, but if we can lower that, we lower our exposure to conflicts around the world, like the Suez Canal back in the 70s, or the Strait of Hormuz now, or God forbid Donald Trump decides he wants to take the Panama Canal. You know, I mean, and that's not suggest. Well, he's already suggested it himself, hasn't he? So that's a matter of time. So I don't know. I'd just like to know where you are with this, and have you noticed the prices going up, and are you prepared for that? None of this is our making, by the way. None of this has anything to do with us, but we will pay the cost for it, undoubtedly. And this Labour government has come up with £53 million to help. I mean, that's nothing, is it? I thought at the time. I mean, I could live on it, but 53 million, it's not a lot of money. And they're only going to give it to the poorest in society. Well, the working middle class is becoming the poorest in society with all of these costs going up. But anyway, is that enough? Do you want the government to do more? Should the government do more? How can they do more? Or should we rush ahead now with renewables? Those are the questions. I've got lots. And what is your solution to this? Do you have a solution to this? Do you have a theory that would help us out at this moment in time with our, I mean, complete dependency on oil and gas that comes into the country? So give me a call on that. Love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message to 87222. Well, with me in the studio to discuss this and the papers of the day is the wonderful Amy Fisher, former Director of Comms for the Conservative Party.
Hi
Hello.
there, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I saw you nodding when I was talking about oil. For you know, people who are off the grid, who aren't on the grid.
Well, yeah, I mean, I sort of come from kind of East Anglia, so I have a lot of friends out in that part of the world, which is very rural, you know, farming sort of families. And yeah, I was talking to a couple of them even just over the weekend, and what you said about the costs are absolutely astronomical. I mean, we've all kind of seen the figures around what it might potentially mean for kind of households and household fuel bills, but when you are talking about sort of more rural communities, as I say, you know, farming being the most obvious. But I mean, we're talking about leaps in prices that have already happened. So it's not that they're sort of looking at scary future predictions.
No, they've already happened.
This is literally
doubling and tripling.
what their oil is going to cost, you know, this week, which they need for their farm to run. So, you know, that sort of fear hike has already very much happened there. And as you say, like, none of this is our making it. And actually, they can't do anything about it. Like, if you run a farm, you need a certain amount of fuel just to keep it going. It's not,
yes,
you know, a sort of
choice,
unpalatable choice that a household might have about, you know, turning the heating down a little bit or not turning the heating on at all. And, you know, thankfully the weather is getting a bit warmer. You know, they can't not have the fuel to keep their farms running. So no, that has been, those sections of the community is already very, very much.
Well, not to mention fertiliser as well, which we need for food production.
And I mean, that's not hit with quite such immediacy, but yeah, that's certainly coming down the track too. I mean, what I find, I mean, this sounds so obvious, but what I find so staggering about it all is, you know, again, the absolute lack of Trumpian strategy. I mean, I was just sort of I'm just a sort of comms lady, that's my experiences, but it just seems to be so blindingly obvious that this is how Iran would react and retaliate.
Well, they've done it before, but
this is what I mean. It's
yeah.
And you know, I'm not a sort of global defence or foreign policy specialist. I'm, as I say, you know, a lady with some expertise in kind of comms, and you know, as soon as the whole, you know, sort of preemptive war on Trump and the Israelis part started, I mean, that's just where. I mean, isn't that just what we all thought, that this is actually going to become about?
Well, he was warned about it, apparently. Trump was told that the likelihood of Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz was incredibly high, in fact, 100%.
Yes.
And he said, oh, it'll be over by then, they won't know what's hit them.
Oh, well, he's also having this really good time, and it's all such fun anyway.
Yeah.
And
he said they'll have capitulated by then and the whole thing will be fine. So he ignored the advice that he was given, that this would be a catastrophe.
Well, yes, and there's sort of ignored advice that I think is on, you know, some of the front pages, that, you know, the top counterintelligence chief in the States has resigned, saying, I really don't know what was going on here and I want no part of it, because I don't think this war was
any
necessary.
legitimacy.
So, you know, whether how trusted that particular counterintelligence intelligence guy was within the Trump circles, it's actually all still part and parcel of the same thing. If there clearly wasn't a plan, let alone a strategic one, at any point, which, yeah, part and parcel of the Canal of Hormuz being closed, was just so blindingly obvious. And then it is quite literally the rest of the world who are facing some really quite frightening real-world consequences.
Yeah. And Trump as well has been saying to the American population, we're not as reliant on that oil. We've got our own oil. We've got loads of. We've got the biggest oil fields in the world. We've got the most amazing oil fields in the world. But he's failing to advise those American people that oil cannot be used in its current form.
No, there are different categories of quality of oil,
and
basically.
The quality is appalling, and it has to be sent to be refined before it's sent back. And so that's why Canada has been, they're the only refineries set up to refine that particular type of oil in that region.
All oil is not equal.
It's not equal.
So
you might have a bucket load of it, but it's not very good quality. It's the same as in the North Sea.
Well, the same as Venezuela, when people sort of suggested, oh, well, now Trump basically controls Venezuela, that'll be fine as well. It's like, well, no, because the quality of oil from Venezuela is
really dirty. It's really heavy.
Horrible. It's not good stuff. Nothing like the purity that comes from, you know, Iran and that part of the world, which is, you know, where the pinch point with the closing of the canal is really pinching people. But yes, as I say, the whole thing is just an entire lack of strategic plan, and Trump's kind of repetitions, his, you know, grandiose, as I say, Trumpian bombastic. It'll all be done. It's all fine. We've sunk all of their navy, and then well, oh look, the drones still seem to be, you know, a bit of a problem because Iran has always produced a lot of them quite quickly and quite cheaply.
And supplied Russia.
Yeah, and supplied Russia, exactly. And there is no response from Trump other than it's all going well. Yeah, we're on them.
We've won. I mean, he said we've already won.
I mean,
somehow
I'm not sure he's even quite sticking to that line, though, is he? Because, well, I mean, that hasn't won. But yes, his entire response just seemed to be, yeah, we're America, we're on it, we're the ones taking the lead.
Might is right.
Might is right. Yeah, at the same time, sort of wanting help from everybody else, then not getting it, then being terribly obsessed. But I never wanted it anyway. It's that classic sort of school round thing. It was like, well, I never wanted to be your friend anyway.
Yeah.
Didn't want you to come to my party. You know, so as ever with Trump, it's all too easy to fall into these. Well, I mean, I just did it. Fall into these kind of mocking characterizations of him, and it would be funny were it not so scary that we are talking about the most powerful man in the world, in charge of the largest military-industrial complex, who's just sort of started his second war of the year.
Yeah.
You know, and then is saying these things about, you know, potentially Cuba and all the rest of it. It's sort of all.
Yeah, and like you said, it does appear to be the lack of strategy. And I was reading today after that resignation, as you were saying, about how this has been a more stable, less turnover in this cabinet than there was in the last cabinet. But that's because he's hired all his cronies and sycophants. So and they're not going anywhere, right? Because they're
Yeah, but also,
fine.
I mean, if we know anything about politics, sort of comparing one lot of previously very bad turnover with something that seems slightly less bad is a bit like when Rishi came in after Liz Trump, and it was, Liz Truss, and so everyone was sort of like, oh, well, it's not as bad now as it was, but everyone's sort of still clinging to the cliff face, you know, with their sort of knuckles turning white, because, you know, that's not a great comparison in politics, be it domestically here in the UK or over in the States, that just because something is slightly less awful, I mean, that's not a great baseline for it being in any way actually empirically stable, or something, as I say, that you want, you know, the most powerful country in the world, for that to be the state of its politics.
No, I mean, it just when I think things are calming down and things, you know, and then he makes that comment, like so you mentioned Cuba, I can do what I like.
No, it's the way he just sort of
throws it out
just
there.
Tosses it out, sort of.
I can do what I like.
Just very, very casually, in that way that it's so unnerving, because I just have no real sense of how much he's thought about anything.
Can you imagine being his comms director?
Yeah, well, this is what I mean. Like, before the moment these words leave his mouth and therefore, you know, go around the world's media. I have no reading on how much he's thought about them or how much he believes them the second that he's saying it.
Well, if there's a filter in between anywhere there.
Yes, and then that in and of itself just escalate things. So obviously, if we look back historically, whenever there have been any periods of kind of détente or de-escalation, obviously most famously during the Cold War, it has been when sort of the leaders of both sides, if you like, have formed some kind of relationship with Yeltsin, obviously, and sort of Thatcher. There was some kind of
respect.
Respect, and I was going to say personal sense of trust, and perhaps that's too strong a way to put it. But both leaders, or albeit with sort of Reagan, like the leaders of the involved countries were able to be in a place where they felt themselves internally and domestically to be in a position of such strength that they could sort of slightly back away from the precipice without them domestically losing any face, and then also had enough of a something in their relationships with their counterpart in another country that they trusted the other person was going to do the same and not leave them hanging. And that's the only way you get to sort of slightly creep back right through the very cliff edge. And certainly how anybody, apart from whatever weird thing he's got going on with Putin, with Trump, there's this inability to ever kind of know what he's going to say at any given moment, and even if he said it, have a read on whether he really means it.
Or whether he'll change his mind.
I mean, as he's done the tariffs on basically any other big pronouncement he makes on the global stage, it sort of seems to be, as I say, true at the moment at which you might have said it. Whether that means it's going to be true by the next press conference, it is anybody's guess.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why there is such uncertainty around when this will end. Will ground troops be going in? They're certainly on their way there. Could this escalate? I mean, the thing that I find so annoying, well, I don't know whether annoying is the right word, is that the diplomats are talking about, we've got to find a solution where all three of these men can save face. Grow up. Take a quick break. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie, and with me Amy Fisher, former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party. Amy, let's have a look at the papers. The Sun, the meningitis outbreak spreads. We covered this yesterday. Annabelle, 21, loses sight for 2 days and still can't walk. A student was blinded for 2 days, is still unable to walk after contracting meningitis.
This is so terrifying, this story. Obviously, it's on the front page of a number of other papers, and as you say, has been for a couple of days. I mean, you know, and again, I don't mean to sound sort of simplistic about it. I mean, 2 people have died in this outbreak, and I don't wish to sound scaremongering, but I fear they may not end up being the only 2. I mean,
there's 11 seriously ill.
Exactly, and meningitis, when it hits, it can hit you very, very quickly. You can get, you know, the symptoms.
You go downhill very, very fast.
Very rapid, and if you don't sort of, there's a sort of 6-hour period if you've got particularly virulent strain where you need to go to hospital, otherwise your life is literally in danger. I mean, I certainly remember, you know, when I was at university, I'm about to really age myself, some 25 years ago, that was when there had been, actually prior to the other previous outbreak in 2015, that was when, kind of late 90s, there was a really serious outbreak just when all the universities, you know, had gone back. And, you know, I remember sort of whenever sort of somebody felt a bit poorly or something, all of us friends were sort of checking them every couple of hours to make sure, you know, they didn't have the rash, which you do the kind of glass test on. And there was one evening when, you know, I was sort of being meant to phone my mother back or something, and I hadn't, and she found almighty rage, you know, almighty chaos, and phoned the Porter's Lodge and demanded that nice Mr. Simpson came and knocked on my door in college to check, and I was obviously there drinking wine and totally baffled as to why this had all happened. But no, but this is really serious. There are the 11 serious cases that you've mentioned. It's at the University of Kent. They are issuing sort of preventative antibiotics and also rolling out quite quickly a jab. But I fear that, given it's been a couple of days since we sort of know the genie's kind of already out of the bottle, so the real question here is not only getting it on top of it in terms of sort of, you know, ground zero, if you like, in terms of where these infections have occurred, but how...
Where has it gone?
Is it in London?
Yeah. I mean, this was a nightclub. People could have travelled from anywhere to go to this nightclub.
What I mean.
It could have been
Kent
a birthday
is not,
party.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly that.
Kent is not far away.
Really worrying. And they've discussed, it's the meningitis B, Men B strain, which is particularly nasty. And they only introduced vaccines for children in 2015 against that particular strain.
So this is why these kids here at weren't
covered
for it. None of them have been vaccinated, but no, I mean...
There's a massive uptake in the vaccines now, which is good. Good. Because I always worry about the state of people not taking up vaccines for whatever reason. And I was talking to a doctor yesterday, and it's largely because, not because people are vaccine sceptic, although that is for some of the population, but it's largely because they haven't seen the effects of the disease for so long, because vaccines work very well, that they don't think it's necessary.
I will tell you something more frightening than that. Speaking to a friend's daughter earlier today, a few years ago, so she's in her very early 20s, so a few years ago, the nurse was meant to come round and vaccinate her school. A sixth form girl, for some reason the visit was delayed, like the nurse just couldn't come, and there was no sort of locum put in place. Vaccination therefore didn't happen that day, was scheduled for a couple of weeks later. Within the intervening time, a girl in the sixth form got meningitis and died.
Oh God.
And actually not that money can ever make up for it, but subsequently actually did receive some large compensatory payout for the fact it was a complete administrative
God, you never forgive that, would you?
Mess up that, literally, the nurse was meant to come, vaccinations didn't get done in that school that day, rescheduled for 2 weeks hence. In that period, a 17-year-old died.
Oh, that is horrific. You'd never get over that, would you?
No.
As a family. Yeah, it's a very, very serious disease. We're just saying that wherever kids are at university, make them go and have a vaccine. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Wherever they are, doesn't matter where they are. There's often breakouts of meningitis in universities by nature of what young people get up to, I suppose. But they think this was sharing a vape.
Yeah.
Or at least it could have been a contributory factor. But you know, there's... Go and get vaccinated. Phone your children and say, look, I don't care what you're doing, go and get it done.
If you can't get through to your children, phone the Porter's Lodge and get them to go and knock on the door.
Or just like I do, just phone all their best mates and embarrass them. That works. So that's that. The Times as well, fatal meningitis outbreak declared a national incident now. Health officials fear the death toll will rise after super spreader event at the Kent nightclub. And like we were saying, Kent's not that far away from London. There would be a lot of people that went down there, maybe a birthday party, maybe a hen party, you know, whatever it might be. And that appears to be ground zero, but do we know that for certain? That's obviously where the spreading started to happen. It takes up to 14 days to develop symptoms, meaning health officials are expecting more cases to emerge in the coming days. About 1 in 10 people infected with meningitis B die. Yeah, that is a very high percentage. Yeah. That is really terrible. And the other thing is to remember, because I do want to scare people into getting these vaccines, is that even if you survive it, in some cases, the sepsis will take your limbs. Or eyesight, as or in your brain. Yes, long term, the lady on the son has got hopefully temporary blindness, but that is one of the most common effects, is irreparable damage to optic nerve. Yeah. So it is incredibly serious, and I hope that these young people that died have persuaded other young people to go and do something. You know, go and vaccinate yourself or take some antibiotics. Council takes a stand over the rise of bench memorials. I like a bench memorial. So do I. Memorial benches have long served as a stoic way to mourn, offering quiet seats for reflection. Born during the Victorian public parks movement, they spread during the collective grief of the First World War. Now critics say that a profusion of memorial benches is overwhelming nature spots and coastal towns around the country. But councils have to approve. You can't just wander in with a bench under your arm and stick a bench down and nail it to the floor. Councils have to approve them, don't they? They do, and look, I agree with you. I rather like these benches. I love them. I always read the... So do I. My favourite for doing that is kind of overlooking Richmond Park when all the bluebells start to come up. Actually, around this time, I just remember one in particular, sort of in prime spot, where you can just sort of overlook the bluebell wood, and it sort of just says, "For Edith from Stanley, she so loved it here." That's it, and it's so poignant in its simplicity. Lovely. Absolutely beautiful. And actually, when I was very surprised when I went to Central Park, obviously in New York a few years ago. They have them there too. Yeah, this is not a Brit. Yes. This is not a weird British thing, and it's exactly the same thing of in, you know, sort of quiet spots or somebody's favourite spots. You just get these lovely plaques, which sometimes are just a date, or as you know, with the example I've just booted, something so simple can be so evocative. So look, I think it would be a shame if it were to be stopped, that you can no longer do things. The bit that's highlighted in the Times is that some residents have said that the benches have become more, quote, like graves and somewhere to sit, describing eyesores listed with photos, flowers, teddies and cheap plastic
this I don't understand. I do not understand this. You see it around London, don't you?
On lampposts
and things like that, sort of, you know, 3-week-old dead flowers and a struggling teddy bear. And that is not the place to do that, and I would agree. If if a bench becomes then that's not good.
I completely agree. So look, I hope some kind of sense that can be exercised here, whereby if it is that the sort of former, the sort of simple bench with a little plaque, that everybody else is welcome to sit there and also enjoy the view that in this case Edith so liked to Richmond. Absolutely lovely. But if it is becoming this attraction for, I'm sorry to say, sort of the cheap plastic it was basically sort of litter when you've got the kind of cellophane around the flowers.
And there's a lot of it in graveyards and crematoriums now. Now that is causing a real problem for people. It's just that I don't know what this thing is, where we've got that from, because it's a fairly recent phenomenon.
I started with Diana, didn't it?
Probably.
And that's 30 years ago, not to age me and us again. But to your point actually about...
never used to happen, though.
No, to your point about sort of, it's not just kind of the eyesore issue. There is actually a wildlife element there, because when you've got all these sort of plastic bits on the cellophane, and for the birds and it getting into their food and digestive tract. So it's not just me being sort of curmudgeonly, having something against Hallmark teddy bears. I mean, I sort of don't.
But no, I can see where in this case is people, if they are attracting, you know, the flowers and the sort of photos and all the rest of it.
Then you just get surely the park then just cleans it, and then people will stop doing it. I mean, that's the thing. Because this guy, Simon Corbett, says, he said he blamed this on people looking for things to complain about. He said, after losing my parents, having a bench in a local park means a lot. It's somewhere to sit, reflect and remember them. Yeah, I've said to my son to chuck my ashes off Hammersmith Bridge, and then once a year he can go and chuck a lily off Hammersmith Bridge and go and sit in one of the pubs.
Something a little bit more thoughtful, like chuck a lily.
And then chuck a lily and go and have a pint.
Yeah, no, okay.
In the pub. Well, they've got gorgeous pubs there. I like those pubs. I've been to them many times.
Yes, both.
Yeah. So why not do that instead of having a bench?
No, I agree. I mean,
go to the pub. Maybe I'll buy a chair in the pub.
Well, I've always sort of said that. Yes, I would quite like that.
Yeah, I love
the way
that.
you sometimes in proper local pubs, you sometimes see people have their tankers.
Yeah.
So real locals or sort of regulars will have their tankers.
Plaque on the edge of the bar. A guy called Eddie used to always, that was his spot. And so they put a little plaque to him there. I thought it was cute.
No, I like that.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. Right, let's take a break. Amy and I'll be back in a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good evening. This is Petrie, and with me the lovely, wonderful Amy Fisher, who is a woman who drinks a pint. I like that. I like that about you. Yeah, I like that about you. Drink a pint. Yeah. Let's have a look at the iPaper. Your war on Iran is based on a lie, says Trump's security chief in open letter to America. This was the director of the US National Counterterrorism Center who says that he saw all the intelligence, and he said Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. This is Trump appointee Joe Kent claimed that Israeli pressure deceived President into taking military action and urges him to end the war. He resigned, saying he could not stand by because he is a what they call a gold star husband. In other words, his wife was a serving military.
Wasn't she?
She was killed in Syria, he's also a veteran. He said he will not be responsible for the next generation of young people going into a region that has nothing whatsoever to do, that there was no threat there, and dying for Israel and America.
Well, doesn't this all feel terribly dodgy dossier, you know, weapons of mass destruction? You know, it's all a lie.
Yeah.
And this is a serious problem for Trump. As much as Trump has you know, had this reaction to this chap Joe Kent's resignation. He sort of said, oh, you know,
he's weak.
He said he's just kind of more patronising. He said, oh, he seemed like a nice guy, but he's kind of weak. He couldn't follow through. Like, he's a bit of a nobody, really.
Well, he appointed him.
Firstly, you appointed him, as you can do in America. You know, when you come in, you appoint these very senior, what we would see as civil service positions, and therefore, you know, neutral in this country. In America, you know, they become political appointments. So, firstly, that's a little bit of an issue for you. Secondly, this guy, for all the reasons that you've just laid out, is not some sort of, you know, wet,
flaky,
dull, you know, sort of flaky, you know, college boy who's never seen anything of the world. This is you know, the guy himself has quite literally seen active service, as indeed, you know, as his wife did, and in the pursuit of duty for our country, lost her life in 2019. These are not
in Syria.
In Syria, this is not sort of the weak kind of leftist as much as Trump would like to characterise it. And Trump's being tied with Netanyahu, and I'm specifically saying Netanyahu as opposed to Israel.
I would agree, it is Netanyahu.
And I think that's quite important.
I don't think it is the country of Israel.
No, so I think it's quite important to always just keep that distinction clear. You know, this is becoming a problem for Trump, you know, even within the Republican Party now. So it's not, you know, it's not just that he's lost kind of the Democrats, who actually, by the way, also were always fairly pro-Israel, as in, you know, America as a whole has always been, and it was political entities therein, has always been rather pro-Israel. Like, within his own party now, there are people seriously questioning...
The cracks are starting to show.
Quite why he seems to want to always tie himself so closely to Netanyahu, and, you know, the fact that this guy has now put himself above the sort of metaphorical parapet and said, this is a problem. Why are you going along with this guy? We've got no actual proof of any of the edifice upon which you're setting...
I mean, Netanyahu's been saying for 40 years they're 2 weeks away from getting a nuclear weapon. And also, he was the one that started the rumour or the suggestion that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction.
Well, this is what I mean about it. It's the same dodgy dossier.
And not one Israeli soldier, by the way, died in Iraq.
There isn't... It's not a... Look, I'm not saying that there isn't a legitimate reason to have been concerned that Iran had designs on having a viable nuclear weapon.
I would say it's fairly likely.
That's not a controversial thing. There is a big difference between accepting that as a sort of truth in global geopolitics and saying it's, you know, 10 days, 2 weeks to go, which clearly, I mean, just isn't true. So... Yet again, it
can't have been true if he obliterated their ability to make weapons in June. There's so many
inconsistencies and the internal incoherence of every statement that Trump makes about this. And I'm not even talking about the ones where he's just saying things on the fly, like, I might invade Cuba next. These are the things that he's saying that are like meant to be the fact-based bits that just aren't true. And you know, and again, he's setting himself up for... which is what is causing him the biggest problems in his domestic politics. He's setting himself up for the loss, because there will be loss of American life.
There has been already.
There has been already, and if they put, you know, more troops on the ground, more Americans will lose their lives on the basis of a lie.
As we saw with Iraq. And British
and
soldiers
Vietnam,
and
if we really
NATO
want to go. I mean,
soldiers.
Vietnam wasn't about nuclear weapons, but, you know, look, we can point back to these absolute, you know, bloodshed moments of American military history, and this is not something he can just brush off with his usual sort of the way he sort of got away with the way he deals with Russia. But as soon as it actually becomes about American families losing their sons or husbands or brothers, you know, that's going to bite there. People just aren't going to buy the BS, frankly. Which, in a way, as I say, with Russia, his kind of BS about Russia, he's managed to get away with, because there's actually no American... There's not an American loss of life.
And it's far enough away.
And it's far enough away, and there's no sort of Americans actually there, whereas this is quite different. There have already been, I think it's sort of 4 or 5, I mean, a fairly small number of American deaths, but as soon as you get boots literally on the ground, that is not going to be the case.
There's been 13 now American deaths because of the fuel plane that crashed. We haven't heard why. There wasn't friendly fire or aggressive fire apparently, but it did nonetheless crash, killing 6 people on board. And there's a lot of concern in America that, of course, when Charlie Kirk was shot, they went to half-staff on their flags, on the American flags. The same has not happened for these heroes. And there's lots of concern as well that even in press conferences he hasn't. It is
because he doesn't want it to be true.
You would name
because he doesn't want it to
heroes.
be true.
Yeah.
Because as soon as he has to acknowledge that this has been an actual loss of American life, that is very difficult for him. If I don't talk about it, well, it's the same way as when he was asked directly about whether it had been a US Tomahawk that hit the school. When he was asked directly about it, he just went, I haven't heard about that.
I don't know anything about it. This is our
complete, and it was a real. But again, it's this very childish sort of la 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 la. If I don't want to hear it and I shout a bit louder and I don't acknowledge it, then it's not really a thing that I have to deal with. And that is the Trump worldview.
It's really, it's really, really scary because I don't see how all 3 parties in this war can save face.
No.
It's not going to be possible. He could declare victory because we don't know against what metric, because he's never declared the metric.
I mean, that's actually a possibility.
Yeah, he could declare. I was saying this yesterday, that my worry is that he will declare victory and off sod.
Yes.
And then we'll just go, right, your problem now, you solve it.
I was about to use another word that sort of ended with off, but I entirely agree that he might just go, right, yep,
I've done my bit, and now it's over to you. Your problem, you solve it. And I can hear him saying it.
Yes, which would also be sort of fitting with the way that he was basically marching, Iranian rebels up to the mountaintop when he sort of help is on its way. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And it sounded very much like he meant, yes, sort of freedom fighters, those of you wanting to topple the oppressive regime, we're coming to help you. Well, and then he didn't, and then he just started a war.
And he's killing innocent Iranians, like 668 little girls. Let's have a quick look at the Telegraph. Trump, the BBC is against me winning the Iran war. US President says relationship with Britain was the best before Starmer came along. It's interesting, isn't it? A lot of people have a bad relationship with Donald Trump, but obviously it's their fault. It's just a coincidence that most countries have a bad relationship with him. Donald Trump was asked at the BBC. I can't actually read that.
Well, no, I mean, he dislikes the BBC anyway, doesn't he?
Them for 10 million.
Yeah, exactly, because there's the sort of clip about a speech, and as Jas got this sort of multi-billion-pound lawsuit somewhere in
Well, he's threatened the licenses of broadcasters in America if they don't start being more patriotic and saying how well the war is going. So basically he wants a puff piece every day. And Pete Hegseth was livid that the faces of the dead fallen were put on the front pages of newspapers.
Yeah.
Saying that that's disgusting, that's anti-patriotic.
How, though? These are people who've died in service.
I can't answer for those
of their country. So how can... at the least noting their death be, and it just doesn't make it, again, it's this lack of internal coherence about any of it.
Yeah. No, it is, what a mess. And the other story on the front page there, just it's a nib at the bottom right, middle classes should not get help on their bills, says Rachel Reeves.
Well, I think, as you just said, I mean, what sort of might have been the middle class is now rapidly becoming
poor,
as scrimped and squeezed, and as worried about bills as sort of anybody. I mean, because middle class used to, in fact, in terms of economic definition as well, used to imply. Well, actually, used to be a certain level of comfortability.
Yeah.
As in, you could, and there are various metrics, like how often you would go. The classic one is how often, if you had like a kind of annual family holiday, and you would have a sort of you know, X amount in savings. You'd have more than like one savings account per household. There were all of these various metrics that meant, yeah, you're kind of okay. You're not rolling in it. You're not buying a new car every year. You're not sort of, you know, having gold-plated taps and unicorn tears instead of water. But you're broadly okay with, you know, in life. You probably sort of mostly shop at Sainsbury's, occasionally Marks and Spencer's. You know, one of your children probably has some kind of hobby, like piano lessons, again, sort of extracurricular activities your children would do with one of the sort of metrics and markers. And that just implied that you had quite a nice standard of life. It didn't mean you were entirely without worry, but it meant that you kind of every month you weren't literally like, the MOT is due.
Yeah.
Or
you could afford a new washing machine if the old one broke.
Exactly, and that is not what middle class... No. I don't know what that class is now, whereby you know, you just don't worry about...
Well, it's only the people on benefits who benefit from all of these extra and add-ons, and they're the ones that got the pay rise this year.
And they're the ones who get the help with fuel.
They're the ones that get help with the fuel. So yeah, it is fast flipping that metric. Right, we've got to take a very quick break, but we will be back.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie, and with me Amy Fisher. We're both heads down there reading the front page of The Guardian at that point. The exclusive here, Farage backs rioter and uses far-right slogans in video clips. This is Nigel Farage has sold online videos in which he endorsed a neo-Nazi event, repeated extremist slogans and supported a man convicted over his involvement in a far-right riot. The videos, which the Reform UK leader says should not be seen as political statements, are amongst several highly questionable clips identified in an investigation into his use of the personalised video platform Cameo.
Now, I don't know anything about Cameo, but is that where celebrities do happy birthday wishes and things like? Yes, it is. So that's when they sell that you say, look, if
Firstly, who's getting a Cameo from
Nigel Farage?
Farage?
Well, I suppose he's got lots of fans. So if people wanted me to wish them a happy birthday, so Amy Fisher would pay me 70 quid, and I go, Amy Fisher, happy birthday. 70 quid.
As a business model, I mean, it's obviously quite...
So that's what he's selling.
Quite a profitable one.
Yeah.
Now, look, I mean, OK, so Nigel Farage is then saying that these things should not be seen as political statements.
No, he's saying what people want him to say in order to earn that money, but they shouldn't be seen as a political statement.
But he is, I mean, the thing that he's famous for, which is why people know him, which is why people want to pay him for cameos, is because he is a politician. So you really can't have your...
It does seem like a conflict.
Extraordinary conflict. You really can't have
And I wouldn't get away with that, by the way, as a journalist. If I did something like that and said, don't take this as it being me, I'm not, it's not me saying
also, wouldn't you have enough concern for your own kind of brand as leader of reform to not say things so off-brand when the reason why you're being paid to say things is because you are the leader of that party,
and you are the brand,
and you are the brand. This is exactly so. It's not, so you can't really get away with it on any level. I mean, this looks pretty comprehensive because the Guardian is saying it's analysed more than 4,000 of these kind of paid for things. It doesn't, we can't quite see from what's on this front page, like kind of what percentages of them has got this questionable stuff. But then the point is, even if it's only, you know, 2 or 3, like one is enough. If
but
you're
Amy,
repeating...
this is why he's a multi-millionaire and we're not.
Yeah, but well, I'm perfectly happy with not being a multi-millionaire, but if it doesn't require me to endorse neo-Nazi events and repeat extremist slogans, call me a purist.
You're just so woke. I mean, come on.
No, but this is a problem
No,
for him,
I think it is a problem. Yeah,
because he's also, you know, he got.
But people will say this is just a witch hunt. You know, it's the same as when he was a teenager, coming out with those racist comments that he made. Oh, you know, that this is just a witch hunt. But this
kind of sort of slight whiff of how far right are you actually, like, scary right as opposed to being right of centre in political terms, or are you scary far from it is a perennial problem for it. If we remember last year, he sort of got into this pickle whereby Elon Musk has sort of said favourable things about Tommy Robinson, and then has sort of called on Farage to say how much he was in support of Tommy Robinson, which pushed Farage into trying to put some clear blue water between him and Tommy Robinson, which has now led to Tommy Robinson putting in a pre-action letter threatening Farage with libel. So, like, this is a whole murky sort of world that Farage just seems to be a bit sort of embroiled in.
And after working quite hard to say we're not, you know, that's not who we are.
It just keeps coming. It just keeps coming back up, and that's not to say he is or he isn't. I'm just saying presentationally, this is not a good front page for him, because once again, reform, Farage, and things like extremism and far right are all words in kind of the same sentence.
And you don't want those in the same on the same page. Households. This is the Mirror, by the way. Britain hit by Trumpflation. Donald Trump's war in Iran was last night predicted to send prices spiralling here in Britain. Households now face a £1,300 bills rise shock. I mean, that is huge. That's a lot of money, isn't it?
I mean, if you're on the minimum wage, that's several £100s more than your entire monthly take-home pay.
Yeah.
You know, that's not just a shock that some households
That's more than a month's money.
That's more than a month's money that you've had no preparation time for. As you said, it's nothing to do with you. It's nothing to do with how you've been managing your household finances. That's just, if you're on minimum wage, that is a month.
That's gone.
More than a month.
More than a month gone. And no wonder people are switching on to benefits, right?
Or might be forced to.
Might be forced to, yeah. If they can't, if this keeps going, if
nothing to do with whether they have a job or not, but just, you know, if you've got more money that needs to go out than you've got coming in, and
what can you do? Right, so that's the Mirror, and I do want to say Happy St Patrick's Day. I meant to say that when I first started. I've just got 5 minutes left of it, 4 minutes left of St Patrick's Day, St Paddy's Day, and there is
Kate on with her. I think, is she the Colonel-in-Chief of the Irish Guards? I think she is. Yeah, wearing the shamrock.
She looks lovely.
She does. And I've been to a couple of these St Patrick's Day Irish Guard patrols, and they've always got this big Irish wolfhound.
Because usually that's the photo they have of her, is her like hugging the huge sort of
Irish wolfhound.
Yeah, which are beautiful dogs.
Beautiful dogs, and they obviously they're replaced when they need to be. And he also always wears a shamrock as well.
Yeah,
they're massive dogs. They're beautiful dogs.
I love them.
Yeah, but you normally see the dog. Let's have a quick look. Reeves bets on quantum leap. I'll boost the economy, bring jobs and talent. This is the Metro.
Slightly weird take on the Mays lecture that she did on Monday. Most other sort of news outlets talked about what she said about Brexit, which is basically seemed to be intimating that we might be moving towards some kind of closer ties with Europe again, and also she talked a little bit about some kind of greater fiscal sort of powers for local mayors, or they had more say in sort of saying how national taxation was spent. So that the Metro has then gone with this kind of, debate on the AI investment is a bit of an outlier from A, coverage of that speech, and B, the rest of the papers, which have we seen have mostly been either about meningitis or war.
Yeah,
a cheerful way to end.
Yeah, more cheerful way. Did you watch Quantum Leap?
No.
I loved it. Did any of you? Well, you're too young, aren't you? Oh yeah, John watched it. That's good. At least I got one person in here. So Quantum Leap, it was brilliant. It was about this guy who kept sort of leaping into different people's lives and bodies, and he would suddenly sort of come to as a different person and have to live his life. If he looked in the mirror, he would look like the person.
Okay.
And the character on the front page here was an AI.
Oh, right.
AI hologram that helped him on his journey, or more likely hindered him. But it was a great 1980s TV series.
I might see if I can.
It's fun, actually. The remake of it is pants. Absolutely awful.
Well, the time travelling thing that I always really liked was Life on Mars and Ashes to Ashes.
Life on Mars was brilliant.
Yeah, for a time travelling sort of
that
slightly.
Was so good.
Not really sci-fi, but a bit. I loved it.
Yeah,
really,
it was really good.
That.
And it was really brilliant to have a look at the way the police were with the female coppers and all that.
Yeah, and everything, and just the
so
clothes
sexist
and the
smoking
and the smoking. Yeah.
Absolutely agree with you. Right, that's it. We have to leap now. I have to leap into the next hour, and you have to go home. Amy Fisher, thank you very much.
Very nice to see you. Thank you.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talkback and it is Petrie here with you for the next hour. And I want to talk to you about what's happening to the energy in this country. And I'm not talking about your personal energy, I'm talking about the energy crisis that appears that we are heading into at some reasonable speed now, because the war in the Middle East has, of course, been going on now for over 3 weeks, and it is affecting the delivery of oil through the Strait of Hormuz. But not only that, it is also affecting the production of oil in the Middle East, as several refineries are on fire and have been targeted by Iran. And also because some countries are having to cease production altogether because they don't have the storage space for the oil. So, you know, and once production is cut, you don't just switch it back on and then start producing the oil. So the lag on this, even if the war were to end tomorrow, which it has no sign of doing, frankly, but if it did, there'd still be a lag effect. Of course, it would be better if it finished tomorrow than in September or November, which is what many experts are pointing towards. Donald Trump keeps saying this war is won and it's over. And Pete Hegseth rather randomly said, and this is almost a direct quote. I wish I'd thought about this earlier. I'd have got the clip for you. But he basically said, no, the Strait of Hormuz is open. It is open. It's just there's a problem that if you try to take your ships through it, they might be blown up. He literally said that, I promise you. I'm paraphrasing, but he literally said that. It is open, but if you try to take your ships through there, there's a chance they could be blown up. So this is the situation that we're in. Only, I think, 8 ships got through yesterday. It's 20% of the world's oil. And our exposure to that is not as big as other countries, but that actually doesn't matter, because the price of that oil is now over $100 a barrel. It's sort of stabilised in that position for now, but if there's any hint of ground troops or anything else happening in the Middle East, it could very quickly and very, very speedily rise a much higher value for oil. So there is, the government has now admitted that fuel rationing is possible. Ministers have been talking about this. Rationing fears are rising today, this is yesterday's report, as a minister admitted the possibility cannot be ruled out amid chaos in the Middle East. Treasury Minister Dan Tomlinson said the government is monitoring the situation carefully, with global supplies under huge pressure. Around a fifth of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, but it has been effectively shut by Iran after the US-Israeli launched attacks. Pump prices have already been soaring, while there is alarms that the energy price cap could rise dramatically when it changes again in July. The blockade could have a host of knock-on effects, including on medicine stocks. Downing Street has appealed for people not to panic buy, insisting that garages are well stocked, and any suggestion otherwise is incorrect. And nobody is suggesting that. And there's no point panic buying anyway, because you'll get one tank and then what's the point? But there's no point panic buying. We're not where we were in the 70s, where there was actual rationing of fuel at the pumps. But if this goes on and on and on, there will be a massive knock-on effect. And already the Mirror is reporting that household bills now face a shock rise of £1,300 Donald Trump's war in Iran was last night predicted to send prices spiralling here in Britain. Fallout from the chaos in the Middle East could add more than £1,300 a year to struggling Brits' household bills, with the cost of fuel and mortgages already soaring. The crisis has been sparked by Iran ramping up attacks on the energy infrastructures of its Gulf neighbours and obviously closing the Strait of Hormuz. Amid warnings of skyrocketing fuel poverty, Adam French, who's on this programme often actually, from Money Facts, said the global economy is bracing for a Trumpflation wave from the US and Israel-led action in Iran. So there are talks about now, there's people are talking in corridors about what can be done to prevent us from going into blackouts or issues like that. But for those of us on the grid, it's not such a huge deal because we can rely on renewable fuel to some degree, right? But people, there's 1.7 million people in Northern Ireland and in the rest of Britain who are not on the grid, who rely entirely on oil. And I know from talking to a friend of mine the other day who she was saying, oh my God, the oil prices are out of control. They are double what they were. And they've done that in a week. So I want to hear from you if you are one of those people who relies on oil, on tankers turning up and putting oil in your tanker to fuel your home. If you're a farmer and you can't cut back on the fuel that you need for that, and also we need fertiliser for food security as well. So all of those things, I really want to hear from you about how you're already seeing perhaps petrol prices go. I haven't had to fill my car up for a while, actually, so I haven't really noticed the petrol prices. But have they gone up where you are? What is the pricing like? And does this convince you that the argument for renewables is stronger than ever? We certainly know that fuel security should be number one priority, that and water security in this country, and it's been neglected for decades. So it's not just this government or even the last one. They've all let us down absolutely fundamentally, believing that nothing bad was ever going to happen. We had the peace dividend, we had the 80 years of peace. They thought, well, that's it, that's the world now. There's no wars, there's not going to be anything bad happen. What could happen? And we let it all slide. Not just the military, not just that, but our energy security, our water security, food security, we let it all go, because we thought the world wouldn't change and we could just all buy stuff when we needed it, from wherever we needed it. Well, we now know, we've learnt the hard way, that that is not the case. So, do you have a solution to this issue that the government perhaps aren't doing or haven't thought of? What do you think is going to happen? And do you see fuel? Were you around in the 70s when the fuel rationing happened? I was a kid, so I don't actually remember it. I don't remember it at all. But I'd love to hear from you if you do. What was it like then? What happened? What did you have to do? And there's already discussions as well about reducing speed limits in order to protect our fuel security as well. So basically rationing in the terms of your ability to buy the stuff in the first place, but then also limiting your speedy use of it. So in other words, if you go slower, you don't burn as much fuel. So they're looking at reducing speed limits as well. Or do you feel like it won't really impact you? And what do you make of the government saying, look, if you're middle class, you're on your own, you're not getting any help from anybody, you just pay the bills? How much more can you take of this, having to pay more and more and more for less and less and less? Give me a call. I'd love to hear from you on this, particularly if you were around in the 70s and you remember that rationing. 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at the national rate, but as I say, we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message, please, to 87222. Can you see this getting worse? Can you see problems here, or do you think that we will be okay? Other countries, by the way, in Asia, who are much more exposed to the oil that comes through the Strait of Hormuz, they're having to make radical choices and radical decisions already in order that they don't fall into that cliff edge of having fuel shortages. So we could see some things changing in this country in the next month or so, in order that we don't hit, don't get there and then suddenly go, we've run out. We haven't got enough. And also there will be a pinch point at which point we say, that's too expensive. What we doing? We can't afford to buy that oil at that price. Which is why the oil-producing countries will often stabilise the price of oil when there's a shortage, like with what happened in Ukraine and Russia, by producing more oil. But they can't do that right now. So they can't stabilise the price because there is no stabilisation to be had. Like I said, give me a call, join in the conversation, be the conversation. This is all about you. So let's go straight to the calls. And Grace is in London. Hello, Grace. Good morning. How are we this morning?
I'm very blessed, thank you. How are you?
Good. Very well, thank you.
I noticed that your guest said he was evangelical about green energy, and I appreciate people using the word evangelical correctly, because Trump's lot across the pond completely misuse the word, and in fact it does mean to be really enthusiastic about some good news. So an evangelical Christian is someone who's really enthusiastic about the good news, not someone who supports Donald Trump, and he's evangelical about green energy, which I think is great. As much as I know most listeners to this station are not fans of green energy,
well, they might start to change.
I hope so.
If it's about energy security. And a lot of people are saying, well, actually, this is an argument for renewables so that we break our addiction to oil. I mean, we'll always need a certain amount of it, but if we can break that addiction, and it is an addiction, that's why we'll pay whatever price people want, because we're drug addicts.
The science, right? I mean, the science is clear. Human activity is contributing to climate change. I'm very well of all the arguments that they have against it. I know they say, but the plants like carbon dioxide. The temperatures have always changed. I know all those arguments, and they can all be completely rebutted. But even if one didn't believe in all of that, we are going to run out of fossil fuels. There are a
that's
amount of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And I think that more broadly, it's good to try to look at all kinds of resources in a sensible, rational way, rather than just thinking we should be able to do whatever we like and use as much as we like in whatever way we want. I always have my grandmother in mind who, had rationing growing up, and consequently was really careful with all her resources. She would not want to waste even a scrap of bread. But our culture now, because we've got advertising coming at us all the time saying you must get whatever you want, make sure you have whatever you feel like you want, we've kind of forgotten to appreciate the things that we do have as much as we could appreciate them. And we end up not necessarily using things as carefully as we ought to do. And ultimately, it's not a great attitude to have when we are going to run out of some things. That's not to say that I'm...
I agree. Listen, I think that the argument for net zero has not been won. Because I think the argument for net zero is that a lot of people feel that even if we were on net zero, what does that do? It has to be I think that net zero can be achieved, but I think it has to be a much slower programme. But if we can persuade people that renewables, as you absolutely rightly, emphatically, factually correctly stated, it is going to run out. Oil, coal, because the more you take out of the earth, right, the less we have in the earth, right? It's going to run out. It's definite. It's not going to go on forever. And we have to buy into the idea of renewables. We have to, because not only is the oil running out, but the oil that is left is more and more expensive to get out of the ground. It's going to be cost. The cost of getting the stuff out of the ground and in the last bits. It's like that last bit of ketchup in the bottle, right? You have to put more effort to getting that last bit of ketchup out, and more energy into that, and soon it won't be energy. They won't be energy efficient to take the stuff out of the ground, because it will expend more energy taking it out of the ground than it will actually produce by taking it out of the ground and burning it. So these are facts. This is not woolly, tree-hugging nonsense. These are facts.
As an aside, one of the things that breaks my heart most within this country is that some people are made to suffer with dementia, which is, I can't imagine going through that. It must just be such a horrible thing to go through. And it is worsened by air pollution. Air pollution is a contributing factor, a significant contributing factor.
I didn't know that. I'm not aware of that connection.
So why would we not want to try to reduce pollution in our air, even if one's not concerned about climate change, which I think we should be, particularly because some people in poorer parts of our world are already suffering the effects of climate change. Just to make our air cleaner is also a really important thing.
Without a doubt, yeah. And I think people are persuaded on pollution. I mean, you know, whenever I talk about, you know, the environment, if you then say to people, what about all the plastic in the oceans? They go, oh, yeah, no, that's not acceptable. So you know, people, I think it's just this rush to net zero, and you know, in the big scheme of things, what difference is that going to make when you've got America turning their back on it? You've got China not, you know, they are increasing their renewables, despite what Trump says.
They are,
and you know, there have to be alternatives to that. So I think people are becoming more persuaded. It's just the arguments are not very good. And I think that's what puts people off. I think if you say to people, it's about pollution. Oh, yeah, no, I don't accept pollution. Don't want pollution. We don't want to terrorise the oceans. We don't want that. We don't want all this rubbish everywhere. Yeah, no, I agree with that. We need to cut back on using plastics. I agree. So most people are intelligent enough and smart enough to realise the connection. But it's just in some of the arguments, they're not persuaded by the way that they're put forward. And I can understand that.
I feel like a lot of the arguments that happen in our political space end up being more about which side of the spectrum or side of the argument a person is on than they are about the subject matter themselves. I think that on lots of issues, including immigration, for example, I think the majority of the public is much closer together than some might suppose. But if you feel that you are inclined slightly towards one side more than the other, you can just hear lots and lots from that side, and you feel like you need to lean to that side.
Yeah, it's an echo chamber, without a doubt.
And it can just all become a bit counterproductive. But I'm really concerned because climate change is already impacting some people in our world who have hardly any food or other resources to begin with. And it's also, pretty daunting thinking how it could affect, people of the younger generation. I'm not thinking about myself because I don't know. I'm not particularly young anymore, but I'm not going to have any kids myself for a number of reasons. But people who are my age are having children, and it's sad to think that their futures might be impacted by climate change. But even if one doesn't believe in that, I think a good principle in life is to try to live within your means and to use things sensibly. But we've been kind of led to think that we should all be entitled to get whatever we want all the time, and I don't think that's
well. And also, it's a capitalist system. It's a capitalist system that runs on the basis of us buying stuff, using it, and then replacing it. Right? That's why there's obsolescence is built into things like washing machines. Now, our parents would have washing machines that would last 50 years. Now, you're lucky if you get a couple of years out of it because they've built in obsolescence, so that you have to replace it. Right? Which is why I buy things like that are repairable. You have to pay more for that, believe it or not. If you get a washing machine you can repair, but at least I can then repair it, right, instead of chucking it away.
We can forget how lucky we are. I mean, a while ago, one used to use the word spoilt to refer to giving a kid so much stuff that they stop appreciating things. And now sometimes the word spoilt is used in a positive way, like, oh, you should spoil your loved ones by buying them lots of things. And I think we've forgotten that because we've got so much stuff all the time, we can cease to appreciate it fully. And I remember...
I agree with that, 100%.
On a couple of occasions, I've seen politicians say, well, I'm not going to tell my constituents that they can't go on summer holiday every year abroad. And it's like that would be a terribly cruel thing not to be able to go on holiday every year abroad. But
no, we have been persuaded.
Didn't do that. Our grandparents didn't do that, and they were perfectly happy.
We have been persuaded to be entitled because that's what keeps the capitalist system rampaging forward.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not a case of waiting for it. I need that. I need it. I need it now. I have to have it now. And then we don't appreciate it. And then we replace it anyway with the next T-shirt or the next jumper or whatever. There's no sense of, which is why I'm a big fan of sites like Vinted. And even eBay as well does a second-hand clothing and other items, right? It's a great thing to do. I love buying second-hand.
I get most things through eBay's charity shops, because some charity shops list items on eBay, because I really want the money to go to a good cause if possible. Yeah. So I get most things that way, and it's much better to appreciate what one has and to reuse things where possible.
Very difficult though, Grace, when everybody's being persuaded that they have to have the next big thing. That, and we are advertised at. I'm a sucker for a cleaning implement advert. Honestly, I am obsessed. So if there's a latest cleaning
money down the drain.
Yeah, I know. Look, I've got 2 dogs. What can I say? I'm obsessed with it, and I will be persuaded. I'm an advertiser's dream. But I try to stop myself. But we are constantly bombarded with this. Look, make it better, make it quicker, make it easier. Have this, have that. Do this, do that. And it's very, very difficult to break away from that. And I think that's why we do have the society that we have. But you're right. I mean, a bit of rationing might do us some good, maybe. Maybe we would learn to appreciate things better. Grace, I always appreciate you. So thank you very much indeed for calling in. So listen, give me a call. Have you noticed prices going up where you are? Are you somebody who uses fuel? I mean, we all use fuel, right? But what I mean is an oil tanker turning up to your house and depositing oil into your tanker so that you use it, an actual commodity, the actual thing, as opposed to it being sort of nebulous in the cities. We just switch on an oven and it happens, it's like, ooh, that's magic. And we're better insulated against these prices, not only because the energy price cap, which doesn't apply to the oil that you use, but also because renewables can kick in, different types of energy can kick in. Can't do that if you're living out in the countryside. So I'd love to hear from you, from Northern Ireland or from around the countryside here on the mainland. So give me a call, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. This is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And we're talking now about the situation in the Middle East and the impact that is already having on us here in the UK. I got a wonderful message here from Alison in County Antrim. Hello. She said, lovely to tune into your show. Thank you if you're a new listener. I'd love that. That's brilliant. I live in County Antrim. We got 200 litres of heating oil today, and it cost £261. It was shocking. Can you get back to me and let me know how long that would last you? I've got because I don't understand, litres and I understand litres, but converting into usage. So if you can, or if somebody else knows that, how long would that last an average household? For your, and what do you use it for? Is it just for hot water and heating, or what other uses do you have? And I'd love to hear from you if you're a farmer as well. Are you concerned about the cost? Because you can't cut back. I mean, Alison may be able to batch cook and not have the heating on now that we're supposedly getting 5 days of sunshine. That'll be summer gone. But we're supposed to be getting some sunshine, so the heating might not need to be on. But if you're a farmer, you need all that stuff. So how do you do that? So I'd love to hear from you on that. How do we get through this without it breaking the bank, quite literally? Mark has a solution. He said the government could just take 10% off petrol. I presume you mean the tax. Yeah, they could. I think the tax take on fuel, petrol and diesel is 57%. 57% of what you put into your car goes straight to the exchequer. Yeah. It's outrageous, isn't it? Absolutely. And they could do that. They could do more than that, but they won't. So we know that. Chris is in Birmingham this morning. Chris, good morning to you. Thank you for calling. What do you make of the situation that we might be walking into?
Well, I've got some very good news for you, Petrie, personally, and the rest of you at Talk Towers. If motor fuel rationing comes in, or the electricity rationing, load shedding, you'll be exempt. This is based upon my experience with the previous rationing and restrictions that have happened. People involved in a number of professions, and that includes broadcasting, live broadcasting, would be exempt.
But not the presenters, though. We're not exempt.
Yes, yes, I was working in broadcasting, funny enough, but that's all by the way, during the electricity rationing caused by the miners' strike in the winter of 73, 74.
Yeah, that's the big crisis, wasn't it, when the rationing happened?
Yes, that was the 3-day week where commercial premises could only work 3 days a week. Premises involved in live broadcasting were exempt.
Well, that's not good news, because that means we've all got to carry on working. We don't get any...
Oh, well, Petrie, yes. If you were hoping for a little bit of...
extra time off.
Furlough time, it's not good news. But that would be one of the broadcasting, newspaper production, funeral directors, ministers of religion, anyone involved in food production or food distribution would be exempt or have a much higher allowance.
So even though I don't drive into work...
Right.
With my own vehicle, would I still be considered, so I'd still get a ration card with a bit more of an allowance on it? It's all about me, this is, Chris.
Yes, and this is all about me historically as well. I think you would be exempt. I mean, this is all done from memory. I did just quickly go online when you did your link with Peter, when you said there was rationing in the 1970s. And I just checked because my recollection, and, I was around then, and it didn't come in. It got very close. Coupons were issued, but the actual rationing never came in. The 50-mile-an-hour speed limit came in, and I think it should be higher than 50 if they bring it in, particularly on motorways. Modern car engines are optimised to be most efficient at about 56 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think they'll probably drop it the discussions that are going on at the moment that I've been able to sort of wheedle out of people is to drop it to 60 miles an hour, because that is apparently the biggest saving in fuel is between 70 and 60.
Yes, it drops off very quickly after about 56, I believe. Yeah. But
do you think
that pregnancy? Sorry.
Do you think that we can that this is a situation we could find ourselves in? That because other countries they're finding themselves doing a 4-day week, national holidays on the Wednesdays. In certain countries, there's a lot of changes happening around the world.
Well, of course, sorry to sort of not being very illuminative on that answer. Of course, it's possible, yes. It depends. I mean, what is our strategic stocks in this country? Have we cut back? I know we have on natural gas. We closed our main natural gas storage facility.
Yeah, we don't, because we always believed we could just get it through a pipeline from Norway, and we're still getting it from Norway. But that's not the point. The point is going to be the cost of it. At which point is it no longer cost effective? That's the issue. But I can't believe the naivety, Chris. And if you've worked in broadcasting. I'm sure you'll agree with me. Is that how did we sit back on our laurels and go, well, the world's not going to change now?
Well, my view never was that.
No, nor mine.
No, and it's not mine over the situation in Ukraine.
No.
In 2014, that should have been when Crimea was annexed. That should have been a big red flag to us.
Absolutely. It should have been an international pushback at that point, in my view, because look where we've got by appeasing people. Didn't work in the Second World War or the First World War. It doesn't work now.
No, and if you want to swing this a little bit to what you were saying, I didn't catch all of it, all of your program. Let's just look at the Iran situation. In the sense, I take it your position is that the current war, or let's call it an increase in the war, is inopportune and wrong.
Yeah.
I take it back to your position.
That is my position, yeah.
At what point should we have intervened to stop Iran doing what it has promised to do since that regime came into power in 1979? And it's not often mentioned that one of the first things they did was to take siege of the American embassy.
Oh, yeah, Argo.
Completely against international, what's the word, protocol. You don't occupy someone's embassy.
No, I mean, that was an extraordinary moment in history. And I completely agree. I have no stock with the Iranian regime, right? I think they're absolutely despicable and disgusting. But the thing is that knowing the regime and knowing the ideology, to back a rat into a corner that is prepared to die is not a clever move, right? That it was never going to be a smart move.
You said Iraq. Are we talking about going back to Iraq, or do you mean Iran now?
No, I mean a rat, as in a rat.
Sorry.
But I mean, again, with Iraq, it was wrong as well.
Sorry, I'm interjecting often.
No, that's fine. But
I'm joking, but I used to have the studio monitors on too loud.
Oh, I have with headphones. Don't worry about it. I'm practically deaf out of here. But it is the case that the Obama agreement, and I've spoken to a lot of experts on this and a lot of specialists and a lot of people who know about Iran, said that it was working. Whether it would have held forever is questionable, and I question that. But now was not the time, and the way it was done was not the way. Because if you know anything about that region, and you would hope that people do understand a little bit more, it's not like bombing the UK, which is not ideologically driven or a theocracy. So you've got people in Iran for whom death is martyrdom. That is the goal. That is not how we feel in this country, and that is not how they feel in America. Survival is the goal. Life is the goal. So I think that in order to curtail or to control an environment like Iran, diplomacy and change is the only way, because any other way is going to create a more hardened, a more entrenched, and a more vengeful state.
Well, what diplomacy or appeasement or whatever do you think that the ideology that drives that regime in Iran will change?
I don't think it...
We'll let Christianity flourish. We'll let the Western ways...
No, I don't think that... None of that would have worked, but I do think that what was in place was holding. It was working. Iran, at the end of the day, even if it is under a theocracy, they did want to be a successful country. I don't agree with the way they went around it. I don't agree with their behaviour, but I think there were ways that we could appeal to maybe their greed. I mean, look at the greed at the top of the regime in Iran, the billions and the properties and all of that. It's always about money. It's always about money at the end of the day. I think there was a way, but this wasn't it. And this is going to make it 10 times worse. More vengeful, more hateful, especially the killing of those little girls. Chris, lovely to talk to you. I've got to take a break because I'm really late to a break and I'll get into trouble. Right, quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. This is Talk and it is Petrie, and it's great to have your company. It's great to have Nick's company. He sent this message. I don't believe we are prepared for fuel rationing. I've noticed prices going up in my local area, but now I use the bus, which of course is always full, with people using buses as a way to save fuel costs. Yeah. All local Esso stations have been revamped with a Greggs. Do you know, I've never had a Greggs sausage roll in my whole life. What about you three? Have you? Well, you don't look at me like that. It's not that unusual, is it? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. It apparently is. God, you should have seen the looks I got there. Esso stations being revamped with Greggs, and I think people will cut back on the extras like cigarettes, magazines, and the Waitrose or MS shops in the petrol stations. And that's Nick from Southall. He says, great show. I haven't heard you on air for a while, and it's great to hear your show again. Thank you very much indeed. Well, now you know where I am. 10 to 1 every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Kaz just said, what happens to our plans of fracking? I'm always so careful when I say that word. Fracking. I think there was too many objections, local objections to it, and I think people didn't go through with it. I don't have a better answer than that. I just think that's what it was. And Chris has said, The new oil crisis has convinced me further that nuclear power is the only long-term option for energy security in the UK. I absolutely agree with you. Depends who we get to build the power stations, though, isn't it? Didn't China have the... That's not a good idea. I think they had a contract for a couple. He said it's cheap, it's safe, and it doesn't rely on the elements or playing nice with terror states. What's not to like? I absolutely agree with you, Chris. I think that we have to embrace nuclear. We have to. And these mini reactors that they're talking about, they don't take too long to get online. I mean, too long. They don't take 20 years like the big ones do. Right, let's go back to your calls. Ben is in Staffordshire. Good morning, Ben. I hear that your house runs on heating oil.
It does indeed, Petrie. And I've got a little bit of a beanie on it about Rachel from accounts saying she's going to help with people on heating oil because obviously we're not covered by the price cap.
Yeah, you've got no choice, right? You've got literally no choice. That is it. Heating oil.
Petrie, it's jumped for it. Well, there was a time when it regularly hovered around 40 pence a litre for kerosene, which is heating oil. We're currently at £1.60 a litre.
What?
And that's just ridiculous. But going back to my point about the government making a bit of noise in the media about, we're going to help people on this. No, they're not. They're going to help people, and this has come out. If you're on universal credit and you want a bit of help with it, that's fine. However, I personally, whilst I'm eligible for universal credit, I have never claimed a penny from the state in my life. I was always taught that if I could get out of bed and put it on, you get up and get to work, and you earn your coin, you do it yourself.
Yeah.
So I have not put my claim in. I refuse to put a claim into the universal credit. I just want to make it on my own.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
For that reason, I'm going to be now punished by having to cover this bill on my own, which there's no doubt about it, I will. But it's crazy. Or,
I completely. Do you know what, Ben? I absolutely agree with you on this because, it is people on benefits are literally the only ones that always benefit, right? And it feels like a reward system for being.
No. I've got no problem with the people on benefits benefiting, as long as they are in need of said benefit.
I agree.
It's not it seems to be currently, it's a lifestyle choice, and it's a bloody big billboard advertisement for anyone who wants to come to this country. I mean, my sister jokingly put up a thing on Facebook with that, we'll pay up to 40 grand for people to leave the country. I tell you what, I'm ready to sign up. You can send me anywhere. If you were to give me, my family's only me, my wife, and I've got two children, but one's already 18 and moved out, so I've got three of us. That's 30 grand. Give me anywhere in the world, I will set myself up on 30 grand, and I will not need any help from anyone ever again. I'm just not. We're depleting our savings at the minute, trying to stay afloat. And it infuriates me that there's people, everyone can say, the immigrants, the hotels, this, that and the other. Yes, that's a burden. Yes, it shouldn't be on him. But there's also a big chunk of people who were born and raised in the country who are career benefit takers. That's their,
Yeah, I agree, and that's what I was saying to you. It is now the lifestyle choice because it is more stable. The pay is more stable. They got a pay rise last year. They're due for another pay. Nobody else got a pay rise.
Pay rise in the private sector.
Yeah,
there hasn't been any pay rise.
No, absolutely not. We haven't seen sight nor sound of a pay rise, you know, around here, and there's no suggestion of one either. And that's because a lot of the companies now that employ us are having to pay more in national insurance, so that's our pay rise is gone. And yet, if you're on benefits, you're going to get a pay rise. And I, like you, have literally no problem. In fact, I support the welfare state 100%. For people who need it, for the original purpose for which it was created. But it has got out of control. It's out of control.
And going on from that, it's like I said to the guy I spoke to before I got on air, my dad's just gone past his pension age. He's worked all his life. He's instilled a bloody good work ethic in me. So, about 10 years ago, the company he was working for, I won't name them, they implemented a computerised scheduling system. So for 30 years, all the engineers booked their own appointments, went out and did their own jobs. Everything worked very well, like a well-oiled machine. They implemented a bit of technology and they all decided, no, this ain't working. We're having 2 or 3 engineers turn up on site at a time. And he left. And a lot of his customers went with him. So he's been self-employed for 10 years. He's just got his pension age. And the first thing the government do is send him a letter and say, your new tax code is 0. So in other words, everything he earns that he's built himself, he's now going to be paying out to, for God knows what and who knows what where. Because there's no transparency. I mean, we always knew politicians were crooked, but we just see more of it now. And I think it's coming to a point. Well, I know I for one am fed up.
But do you think that Rachel Reeves should be helping everybody? I mean, look, as I've said, none of this is of our making, right?
No,
none of this is of our making. And this Trumpflation, an extra £1,300 a year is going to cost households. That is a hell of a lot of money, right? That is a big chunk of money. And I can see a lot of people saying, I give up. I'm going on benefits. I give up. I give up. This is it now.
Honestly,
this is the final step.
Petrie, if this happened to me 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, I don't know if I could have survived. I mean, I'm lucky that I've done well, I've worked hard, and we've got a bit of a bumper that we can... But that bumper will not last forever.
No.
And like you say, it's not our fault. It's nothing, you know, we haven't caused any of this.
No, not our fault.
I mean, take Trump, love him or... Like Marmite, people either love him or hate him. And it is what it is. I don't, with all regards to all this stuff, you're fighting against people who see, like you said, I think it was only moments before I muted me to you're fighting against people who see glory in dying. So how do you win that? Well, you can't.
No, this is what's been underestimated, right? So threatening death and destruction on a regime that doesn't care, and in fact to some degree would welcome that, is not the way to do it. I mean, I'm not a diplomat. I don't know the best way to do it, but I do know that's not the way to do it, right? And often if you know how not to do something, it can lead you to finding out how to do something, right? Because you try different ways of doing it. But this clearly is not the way.
No, and you can see that in the kind of events that's came down. I mean, granted, Venezuela was one thing, but then he's come over, he's done Iran exactly the same play sheet as what he wanted, and then all of a sudden he's like, oh, well, can you come and help us just open this bit of UMES? Like, no, nobody wanted this fight because everybody knew you couldn't win this fight without diplomacy.
Yeah, there's no way.
Yes, diplomacy is difficult with people with absolutely adverse directions to what your normal thinking is, and that everyone's entitled to their own direction of thought and religion and everything else.
Yeah, I agree. Look, diplomacy is the slowest way. It is the most difficult way. But when you know for certain, when you know for absolute certain that bombing somebody and trying to bomb them out of their ideology or their theocracy is not going to work, That's the one thing you don't do. That's it.
You can. I personally, and listeners and viewers might disagree. I personally find it hilarious that Trump went, it's too late to send warships now after the war's already won, and then all of a sudden he's saying, oh, well, can you please send some...
He's desperate. He's desperate. He's suddenly the reality of what's happened and how unpopular the whole thing is with everybody in the world has finally hit him.
It was never going to be popular, and that comes down to base geography. Look at the world you're living in,
and look at history. Yeah,
and then he says, "Oh well, we don't get any other." Well, why'd you start the fight? If you're not going to.
Listen, Ben, I'm with you 100%. It is all just absolutely ridiculous. But he's just suddenly gone, oh, whoops, I'm not the world hero. I don't think I'll be getting a Nobel Peace Prize anytime soon. Ben, brilliant first call. Thank you very much indeed for making it. And do call again. I've got to take a break. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, good morning. This is Talk, and it is Petrie with you up until 1 o'clock. So just a few more minutes to go. A couple of messages here that I want to read out. Gary, morning Gary, says, the way Trump is going, we'll have to ration fuel. I really think the man is mad or has dementia or both. It's time that the UK focuses 100% on nuclear energy. Good point. Agree with them all. Joanna says, I remember the rationing coupons of 1973 that my father had, but luckily never had to use. I'm not a great energy user, but reliant on my car as I'm disabled. At least now we're able to work from home. It will be a COVID lockdown all over again, plus power cuts to reduce energy use. Unfortunately, unlike the war years, there are a few shops and we're all used to travelling for basic necessities. People think electric cars are okay, but will probably have to be reduced as they use electric made from fossil fuels. As I always say, these electric cars are not run on the beating of fairy wings, right? Because the fuel comes from somewhere. If only Ed Miliband hadn't poured concrete down our wells and closed some of the refineries, then built solar farms on our arable fields. Joanna from Salisbury. Yeah, there have been some huge mistakes made, haven't there? This one from Alan in Dorset says, thanks for talking about the oil crisis. It definitely needs bringing to everyone's attention, particularly with the heating oil. We have a holiday rental in Dorset and had 1,000 litres of oil delivered in the middle of February, which cost £589. I've just got a quote from the same company for the same 1,000 litres now, and it's £1,400. So it's gone up almost 3 times. That is crazy. Unfortunately, we cannot pass this on to our guests as the majority are booked at our normal rates months and months ago. So it's just a case of having to reduce our income, which isn't easy in the current climate. Great show. Thank you very much, Alan. Steve said heating oil in Northern Ireland has risen from £480 for 900 litres to over 1,000. Oh, my God. For the same in recent weeks. Significant, as almost 70% of us here use oil compared to 3% on mainland UK. Oh, I didn't realise that. Is it that big a difference? Wow. The reason being is that during 30 years of the Troubles, not a penny was spent on improving infrastructure. They kept blowing it up. And that's from Stephen Millings in Belfast. Wow, you learn something every day. Right, we've got a voice note here. This is from Ian in Feltham, who has a solution to the oil crisis, apparently. I'm looking forward to hearing this.
I have an idea of how we could stop our fuel prices rising. If we stop bombing these countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Libya, maybe these countries will be able to sell us oil at a reasonable price.
It's a brilliant idea. I wish that the egos running this world had thought of that over the last few decades. Brilliant point, Ian. Yeah, of course. I mean, we just need to, well, as we are keeping out of this, but it's still going to impact us, isn't it? It really is. It's interesting. I imagined that when I was prepping for this programme, believe it or not, there is preparation. I've promised me there is. That somebody would mention North Sea oil. So I did a little bit of research saying, well, surely if we tapped into our North Sea oil, then we could solve the problems. Well, let me just tell you, the UK's production of oil is too small. It's 1% on the global markets. More drilling would not lower the bills. It's sold on the global markets because this oil doesn't belong to us. These are private companies that take the oil out of the ground or out of the ocean or wherever it is. And then it is sold to global markets and we buy it back. That's how it works. So they're owned by private companies. The other issue with the oil that we have is it is in what is known as a mature basin. The easiest to reach oil has already gone. We've already peaked. It's already gone. So production has declined over the last 25 years, and the remaining oil is incredibly expensive and difficult to extract. And that's when the cost benefit comes into play. If you're using more energy to get oil out,